In summer 1977, George Lucas' Star Wars blasted into cinemas and changed Hollywood forever. Telling the fantastical tale of Luke Skywalker and his hero's journey from farm boy to Jedi, it was the highest grossing movie of all time, made household names of Lucas and his cast, and became the biggest phenomenon in Hollywood history. My name's John, and I'm here with Westy.
Hold your religions and ancient weapons and no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
And Matt.
Woo dee dee!
Somebody get this walking carpet out of our way. This is the podcast you're looking for on the blockbuster that changed everything. We may not look like much, but we gotta where it counts, kid. Hello and welcome to All the Right Movies, a wretched hive of scum, villainy and podcasts on classic and hit films. Today, 1 year in, we finally arrived. We're talking Star Wars.
Amazing.
As usual, we're going to have laughs and opinions that will be more powerful than you can possibly imagine as we bring you the story of one of the biggest and most influential movies ever made. Just before we start, we love going on about Patreon. All the Right Movies are on Patreon, so if you'd like to access all of our Patreon-only podcasts as well as our archive of older episodes, please visit patreon.com/All the Right Movies. So, fellas, here we are.
Yeah.
Finally.
Why are we talking about Star Wars? Westy?
Because it's Star Wars?
It is.
That's why we're talking about it. It's an absolute phenomenon. It still baffles me now why it works so well, but it does. It hits every single note for me. It's a really special film for me. It's probably the one that I watched most when I was a kid. It was the one when it just came on. It's a whole different world, and every part of it you buy into. It's just so exciting. It's so engaging. It was just something that ticked every single box for me when I very first saw it, and it still excites us now. I'm dying to talk about it.
Well, it's a familiar story for me. When I saw this as a kid, obviously I adored it. There's a lot of great things, and we're going to talk about them all. But I think the area where Star Wars stands out the most, to me, still, is like you touched on there, Westy, the world building.
Yeah. The
world Lucas created is second to none in popular culture for me. If you're a kid with a very active imagination like I was, and still am, that world feels so vast and is so vivid on the screen that seeing Star Wars for the first time is just a mind-blowing experience.
Yeah.
To quote Willy Wonka, as I always try to, it is a world of pure imagination.
As you always try to.
And Matt, what about you? Why do you want to talk about Star Wars?
It's like the Beatles, they've just always been there. I can't really remember the first time I heard about Star Wars. Yeah. I've always known what it was, and I've always thoroughly enjoyed it. And even if you're not a fan of Star Wars...
You'll be a fan after this.
Oh, you will. We'll convert you. But if you're not a fan, you still know what it is. You still know who Yoda is. You still know what a Jedi is. So we have to talk about it because it's such a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. And if we're going to talk about it, let's go at the beginning. Why not? Because it's still an absolute blast.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into it, some of the key details on the film. Star Wars was produced by Lucasfilm, distributed by 20th Century Fox, and released on May the 25th, 1977. Filmed in Tunisia, Guatemala, the UK, and the US. The film was written and directed by George Lucas, produced by Gary Kurtz, and the main cast, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Alec Guinness, Peter Mayhew, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, Peter Cushing, David Prowse, and James Earl Jones. Long cast list.
Yeah, good though.
There's a long crew list as well.
Even longer.
So shall we go all in on the film?
Let's do it.
No half measures.
Here we go then. Next up, it's the beginning of Star Wars.
Open the blast doors.
The beginning.
What do you think of the 20th Century Fox fanfare at the start of the film?
Lucas loved the 20th Century Fox fanfare and wanted to run perfectly into the film from it. So Williams composed something to match, and he made sure it was in the same key.
Star Wars is pretty much famous scene after famous scene right from the off, and we've picked out two great sequences that we're going to talk about. The intro to Luke Skywalker on Tatooine is coming up, but first we're going to look at the first few moments of the film and the opening space battle between the Rebel Alliance and the evil Galactic Empire. So following that big orchestral blare of music and opening crawl, we're dropped right into the middle of an ongoing battle where a small battered spaceship is on the run from an enormous, ominous-looking one. The first few minutes of Star Wars brings us Star Destroyers, Stormtroopers, Rebels, droids, and the most famous princess and villain combination of the last 50 years. What do we think of the opening of Star Wars?
Well, I mean, come on. When it settles, when that crawl fades out and it's just, space and it's very calm and very tranquil, and then that rebel ship comes over and you're like, that's impressive. I'm impressed. And then the Star Destroyer comes over. I keep saying to myself now, I just get more and more impressed and more excited. I was like, is this going to stop? Is this ever going to stop? Look at the size of this fucking
massive
thing. It's unbelievable. And then you go inside the ship and then you just think, that looks even cooler than space does. All of the sets in this, inside that rebel ship, I've never seen anything like it before. It just looks so pristine, but it says a long time ago at the start. So you buy that, it's got a real retro vibe to it, which makes it even better now. Just looks timeless. It's got its own energy. And then Vader comes in and you go, this is even cooler again. Just before that, it cuts you see Princess Leia and you go, well, she's absolutely gorgeous. I'm buying into this. It's fantastic.
It is. The word I would use is spellbinding.
Yeah, it is.
That Star Destroyer rolling over the top of the frame. What an intro to a film that is. In 1977, that must have just blown people's heads off. I love how Lucas drops us right into the middle of a story that's already going on, and he sets up the world in one shot. The rebel ship is small, it's being hunted like the rebels. The Empire ship is huge and powerful like the Empire. Lucas sets up his whole world in about 4 seconds. In fact, this moment is so genius, I'm not entirely sure I believe Lucas came up with it.
There's going to be a lot of that all the way through this, isn't it?
That must have been Spielberg.
He had help.
Lucas actually took the idea of opening the film in the middle of an event in a strange world for another filmmaker. Do we know who that was?
No.
So Lucas was a big fan of Akira Kurosawa, the famous Japanese director, famous for Seven Samurai, Rashomon, wrote lots of classics. And the idea behind this opening came from him. I've got a quote from Lucas where he said, Kurosawa would open in the middle of 14th century Japan and not explain anything. He trusted his audience. I thought, not only does that work, but it works great. And that's where it came from.
Oh, nice. When you had been talking there, I thought Kurosawa rang him up and just went start in the middle of the battle.
That would explain it, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not many moments, is there, in cinema where you can watch something, you can pause it, point at the screen, go, that right there, that's in cinema. Because as soon as that Star Destroyer comes overhead, everything changed. And it's like you said, John, I love just the ballsy nature of just throwing us straight into that story, because it just puts you on the edge of your seat straight away. But when you've got the rebels lining up the corridor, is it just me, or do you think one of them really, really looks like Steve McQueen? Do you know the one I mean?
Yeah, I know who you mean.
I know who you mean, yeah.
I've always thought he looks like Steve McQueen. I'd love to have him
I agree.
Paul Newman's a bit further behind him.
As Westy mentioned, this is the first time we see the big man, of course, Darth Vader. What do we think of Vader as the antagonist of Star Wars?
What's incredible, right? He only has 8 minutes of screen time in this film.
Does he really?
Yeah, which is incredible when you think of the shadow he has over the whole of this film. I think he's just purpose-built to do nothing but terrify kids, because he looks terrifying and he sounds terrifying. How many nightmares is this character responsible for? It's an incredible entrance.
I love how we almost get 2 intros to him. There's the first time we see him when he steps into the corridor after the battle and sort of surveys the dead bodies, and we hear his breathing for the first time. It's like, all right, this is the bad guy then.
Yeah.
And then the next time we see him is when he's choking Captain Antilles 3 feet off the floor, and he just slams his body against the wall. He's instantly fantastic. He looks great. He sounds great. Sold. Yeah,
I had 12 minutes of screen time. I know we're not going to split hairs, but I mean, I've seen it that many times, I just kind of know.
Right.
But, but to put that in perspective, Hannibal Lecter has 16 minutes in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
So Darth Vader has even less time to make an impact, and what an impact. I mean, like you guys have touched on, that costume is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's just excellent. I love the Stormtroopers, I still do. As Lucas is setting this world up, there's no dialogue, but you know who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, immediately. He's one of the greatest cinema villains ever.
Pat Roach actually auditioned to play Darth Vader, but it's David Prowse in the suit, of course, isn't it? Vader is maybe more associated with James Earl Jones, though, the actor providing the famous booming voice. Mm-hmm. What do you think of his work as Vader?
But yeah, it's wonderful. It's the perfect pitch, it's the perfect tone, it's the perfect atmosphere that he brings to it. And then when you mix it with the breathing sounds, it just works so well. You totally believe it. I mean, I didn't know, obviously, until a lot later on that it was a totally different guy doing the voice. You wouldn't guess. It works seamlessly. It's perfect for the character. He sounds like he looks.
Apparently David Prowse, he's one of these actors who he didn't have the best of time filming Star Wars. Because I got a quote from him, he was still angry that they didn't use his voice. And he said, "I was a victim of reverse racism. Because of the lack of black actors in the film, they were scared of losing a slice of their audience."
Right. I mean, you can find footage of those scenes between Vader and Leia at the start before it's been dubbed, so you can hear David Prowse's voice. Have you seen any of that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, for anyone that hasn't, check this out.
I've got first-hand experience of this because I met David Prowse.
The look on your face when you said that. So smooth.
Oh, yeah. This is the only time we're ever going to have first-hand experience talking about the films that we're talking about. But this is about 1989. Obviously, Star Wars is massive. It's all taken off, and Prowse is obviously trying to get a little bit more money back. So he does this kind of tour around. He's in the original suit, looked incredible. But everyone kept asking him where Luke was. Like, where's Luke? And he's like, that's what I would like to know. But he used his actual voice, but he had a really shit vocoder built into the mask. And he had a little speaker on his chest that had the breathing sounds. He sounded like Anthony Daniels, and he was just kind of like, that's what I would like to know. Said to me, Mum, I was like, who the fuck's this guy? It's not Darth Vader.
What's happened to his voice?
It's awful.
I mean, Prowse hasn't got a leg to stand on. It goes from being dreadful with Prowse doing the voice to absolutely brilliant with James Earl Jones.
Yeah, agreed.
Originally, though, Lucas did want someone else to do the voice for Vader before James Earl Jones. Have you heard who that was?
Orson Welles?
Orson Welles, yeah. Lucas felt that he would have been too recognisable, so he went for J.E.J. instead.
Probably would have just said Rosebud over and over again.
Before that opening shot we talked about, though, Lucas gives us some exposition via an opening crawl. So every Star Wars film obviously begins with a block of yellow text that tells us what's been going on. It's a Star Wars trademark. What do you think of that as a way to open the film?
I think it's great. And you know my absolute love of yellow credits. I'm really strange with it. But there you go. A point proved yet again. But I think you got this from the Flash Gordon serials. Am I right?
I think you did.
Actually, the Flash Gordon prologue did have that exact same look to it. Because it does look cool, but it's one of them things that if you borrow it and turn it into your own, like a lot of this film feels like what Tarantino does, but with a lot different approaches that shouldn't really work and smash together, and lots of popular culture that was kind of forgotten about. And Lucas, you know, as an ideas man, takes these great ideas, spins them round and makes them look brand new.
Absolutely, yeah. The art taken from Flash Gordon, even the way they sort of go off into the distance, it's like Flash Gordon, isn't it?
Probably more than anything else, the crawl just takes me back to being a kid. And I think they completely suit the tone of the film and what the film is about. It kind of tells you straight away, this is essentially just a B-movie, but we're really proud that it's a B-movie, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. It's going to be a B-movie with real style that you haven't seen before. Even like the bad Star Wars films, the ones I don't like, I'll still like the crawl on those.
Huge.
So have you heard how the opening crawl came about?
No.
Nope.
So before Star Wars came out, Lucas held a screening of the film to some of his filmmaker pals. And one of Lucas' pals who was there was Brian De Palma, the director.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this version of Star Wars that Lucas screened didn't have an opening crawl. It was straight in, 2 ships, droids, Vader, absolutely mental. And De Palma told Lucas as much. He said he had no idea what was going on and said that Lucas needed the prologue to set everything up. Lucas agreed with him and then wrote 6 huge paragraphs of exposition. He showed it to De Palma, and De Palma said, "George, you are out of your mind. This is gibberish and it goes on forever. It looks like it was written on a driveway." Let me write it for you. So De Palma took Lucas's 6 paragraphs of gibberish, in his words, and reduced it and rewrote it. So what we now see as the opening crawl to Star Wars was written by Brian De Palma.
Oh,
wow.
Amazing. Yeah, from that screen, and didn't De Palma turn around and say, that's the worst film I've ever seen?
So from meeting Leia and seeing her give something to a droid, R2-D2, we then follow him and his pal C-3PO as they leave the ship, land on a desert planet called Tatooine, and come under the ownership of one Luke Skywalker, a 17-year-old farm boy. So we're picking back up after R2 has run away to deliver Leia's message to Obi-Wan Kenobi. In the scenes that follow, we discover that Sand People ride single file to hide their numbers and meet the wise old Jedi, Obi-Wan. So what do we think of these first scenes on Tatooine where we meet Luke and Obi-Wan for the first time?
When you think about it, it's another one of these like crazy decisions that just shouldn't work because there's so much jargon and names thrown at you with no explanation as to what they are. What's a Jedi? Why am I excited about power converters? But somehow they managed to make work because what this film's got, it's got conviction. And what I like about these early scenes is it just really builds up the mystique of it and the mythos, and it just builds the idea that there is a massive universe out there that you are going to explore. And I think these early scenes in Tatooine just build that idea up perfectly.
I agree. I think the world building here is just so good. The first few minutes of the film are all in space and on board the spaceships, and then suddenly we're thrown onto a planet, and it could not be more different. Barren desert for the most part, and the bits of civilization that we do see just feels so real. Luke and his aunt and uncle are farmers, so we get that. They're buying droids from Jawas, who are a bit like dodgy used car salesmen, so we get that as well. And because everything we see is so alien looking, yet so familiar in how it feels, I think it just lets us totally buy into what we're seeing. And you're right, Lucas commits to it 100%, and that's essential.
Yeah, he's like, just accept what you're saying. Every single thing about this film and every scene as they go, there's just so many amazing ideas, and they're just introduced at exactly the right moment.
Yeah.
The droids crash down, and then you see a big Krayt dragon skeleton, which is actually still there. If you go to Tunisia, it's actually still there.
Is it really?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, that's it. See you later.
Nice.
First flight to Tunisia. It should be, looking at it and talking about it, it should be like, oh, come on, I want to get this over with. But it just seems so vast and so unpredictable. So we've got all these like different characters coming up, and there's no explanation. Like Matt said, you know, Jawas are just loads of fun. They're absolute maniacs.
I love the Jawas.
You know what language they speak? It's Zulu, but sped up.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Star Wars has a reputation of being classic storytelling, like tried and tested narratives and tropes. Something which I think is really interesting choice from Lucas, though, is that we don't meet Luke, the protagonist, for about 20 minutes into the film. The start of the film is told from the perspectives of R2 and 3PO, and then when Luke comes into it, it becomes his point of view. So what do you think of that as a way to open the story by Lucas?
I think it's a ballsy choice, but again, one that really, really works, because these two characters you're just getting to know, and you don't know what they're capable of or what the message is she's left, and why they've actually gone there, and why this one is just beeps and bops. And it's very, very well paced, but it makes Luke's introduction even better, because you haven't seen any humans really until he shows up, and then you're like, this is familiar, and you buy into the story straight away.
I do find the beginning just a little choppy, a little bit too bitty for me. If this was a script wrote at film school or whatever, I think the professor would be sending it back with a big red cross through saying, look, come on, how many characters are you introducing us to in the first 20 minutes? You know, the droids crash, they split up, but 5 minutes later they just get back together again. And then all of a sudden, you know, now we're with Luke, right? Okay, who's this guy? So I do find it a little bitty for me, although, yeah, maybe that was what Lucas intended, and he wants to just throw us in the deep end. So when we do meet Luke, we just really got to see a human. I'm like, right, just please stay with this character. Please stay with him for more than 5 minutes. I need something to kind of hang on to here.
I'm just relieved we're not just following 3PO around anymore, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pain in the arse now, isn't he?
Well, for the start, Kurosawa was the inspiration again. In 1958, Kurosawa made a film called The Hidden Fortress. It's a story about rescuing a princess, and is told from the point of view of two peasants who become embroiled in the story. Lucas changed peasants to droids and decided to tell the story from their perspective at the start.
He was obviously just a massive, massive influence, Kurosawa, wasn't he, on Lucas? Because it wasn't just like the story beat he took. He took an actual visual element, which is how he edited the film. And, you know, those famous wipes that transition from one scene to the other.
Oh, yeah.
Completely lifted from Kurosawa.
Yeah, I think now he's sort of stolen them, hasn't he? A bit like Tarantino steals things. Now you see that sort of thing in a film and you would think of Star Wars, probably not Kurosawa.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Speaking of the two droids, Anthony Daniels played C-3PO and Kenny Baker was the man inside R2-D2. What do we think of the two droids as characters in the film?
I really like them, and I think they're the reason why kids love this film as early as they do, because basically R2 and 3PO, they're just kids throughout this film, aren't they? And I love the bravery of just having R2 not have any subtitles. But the great thing is you still kind of get to understand where he's coming from, just by the like intonation of them.
Yeah.
Just a big, big nostalgic love for them, as I'm sure everybody who first saw them as kids did.
3PO is my least favourite character. He is an arsehole. But I love R2. Doesn't give a shit, R2, does he? Just does what he wants.
No.
He's great. Yeah. As a creation, as you sort of mentioned there, Matt, he's a bucket on wheels who talks in beeps and whistles, but he's just got so much personality.
Yeah, definitely.
I just don't know how they did it.
Did you know where the name for R2-D2 came from?
All right, where was that?
When they were editing American Graffiti, the sound designer came over and asked Lucas for reel 2 of dialogue. So it was reel 2, dialogue 2.
Right.
So he asked him for R2-D2. So Lucas overheard that. He's like, I like that. I'm going to keep that.
Oh, nice.
Lucas' inspiration for the droids came from the 3 robots in Silent Running, and it's pretty well known now that Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker didn't get on at the time or afterwards.
I heard that Anthony Daniels didn't really get on with anybody.
No.
Yeah. Tricky customer by the sounds of it.
Well, he used to call Baker Little Man because Baker was 3'8", which is awful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Dick move.
And Baker was asked to go to a Star Wars convention, one of the guests of honor in the early 80s, and he said, "It depends. If his lordship is going, the one with the golden balls, count me out."
Didn't all the crew that would go for lunch and they would forget Kenny Baker was in there and just leave him?
That's so harsh.
So horrible. In the Tunisian heat.
He'll be all right.
Yeah, he'll be all right. He's just boiling alive.
Then he also used to take like adult magazines with him for something to read.
Is that why he's like wobbling from side to side when they don't pick?
In this early part of the film, we're also introduced to the other antagonist. Grand Moff Tarkin is the guy who runs the Death Star and is played by Peter Cushing.
Brilliant. He's just the right amount of pompous. He adds a lot of real serious tone to this dialogue. I think if anyone else was doing it, it wouldn't quite work, but it's when he's like talking about crushing the rebellion with one swift stroke. It's like, oh yeah. I totally believe it.
Yeah, you're right. The dialogue is one of the things that gets criticised for Star Wars, but Cushing just completely knocks it out of the park.
Oh, 100%.
Right up his street. Lucas originally thought about Cushing as playing Obi-Wan.
Right.
Okay.
And when he offered him the role of Tarkin, Cushing said, "What's a Grand Moff? Sounds like something that flew out of a cupboard." And Lucas also said about Cushing, "I feel he will be fondly remembered for the next 350 years.
By who?
I don't know. Matt, what about you and Peter Cushing?
I'm a big fan of his anyway, but I think he just gives this role such gravitas and he just grounds it. Because there's always the potential, I think, for Star Wars to go a little bit camp at times, but I think Cushing is one of those actors, it just keeps it at the level it needs to be with that genuine menace. And I'm a particular fan of that scene he has with Leia. It's the first scene where Leia drops that bolshy attitude when she realises, what he's going to do to Alderaan. And I think as an audience, if you see that Leia is scared, then you should be scared as well. And I think Tarkin is a big part of that. Although, is it just my ears, or is her voice sound English in this scene?
Yeah, she develops this middle-class accent for some reason when she's talking to Tarkin.
Yeah. The only time she does it.
Yeah, because she got on so well with Peter Cushing, they became really close, and she found it really hard to dislike him. So I think what's happened is they spoke that much on set that some of his accents actually passed over.
Right.
Those scenes are great. I mean, I think Carrie Fisher holds her own against him as well.
Oh,
yeah.
100%.
I love some of Tarkin's dialogue where he's like, "You're far too trusting."
Yeah.
Charming to the last.
He's got such a good sneer, hasn't he?
He really
Proper
has.
sneer.
Peter Cushing as well found the boots that he had to wear for the costume. They were too small, so he wore them for 2 wide shots, I think. But then every mid shot, every close up, Peter Cushing's got nice fluffy slippers on.
Oh, see, now that's ruined Star Wars for me.
The character is the only person that I could say, yeah, he's Darth Vader's boss.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Star Wars moves at light speed from the first seconds of the film, and in setting up almost all the main characters and a world that feels real, it takes Lucas less than 30 minutes to accomplish what it takes most science fiction movies 2 hours to not accomplish.
Exactly.
The director.
The main man, Mr. Star Wars. I'm talking, of course, about George Walton Lucas Jr., founder of ILM, Lucasfilm and Pixar, and the creator, writer and director of Star Wars. I think he's worth a discussion, isn't he?
He has to be.
Yep.
So what are our thoughts on George Lucas generally? Matt?
I think he's a massive weirdo. I do.
Straight in.
Pulls no punches there, man.
I just do. I just cannot figure out his career because, like, look at his first 3 films. You've got THX, which is this kind of weird, slightly odd experimental sci-fi. Then you've got American Graffiti, 1950s Americana, really great. Then Star Wars, blockbuster sci-fi. And then nothing. And I just don't understand his thought process behind that. This guy, it looks like he can turn his hand to anything. And then he just doesn't want to do anything. It would be fair enough if he said, actually, you know what? I've discovered directing isn't for me. I want to just work on stories. I want to work on pushing, like, effects boundaries. But he doesn't. He then, like, waits 20 years or whatever it ended up being and then decides to go straight back in there for the prequel trilogy. And, like, no one said to him, George, do you not want to, like, just direct something in between just to kind of keep your hand in, just to keep yourself a bit sharp? And he's like, no, I'll be fine. I'll go straight back into it. No bother.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah, exactly.
Loads of bother.
Yeah. And so I just don't understand how a man who had the world at his feet, he could have done anything. And he just did nothing apart from play out this little universe in his head. And, you know, I'm thankful for the universe he did give us. You know, this isn't a total hit job, but honestly, I can't get my head around his career and how it panned out.
Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit because I think he does get a little bit of a bad rap, does Lucas. He gets slated in some quarters from people like you, Matt. I do understand why, because his output for the last 30-odd years has been absolutely terrible. But those first 10 years, they were some 10 years. He crammed into those 10 years more than most filmmakers can only dream of in their whole careers. I think maybe people think of him as a director, and as a director, obviously he doesn't stand up alongside his pals like Coppola, Spielberg and Scorsese. He's been a director and directed successfully, but I think he's also a great ideas man. He created Star Wars, he created Indiana Jones, and he's a great innovator. He set up things like ILM and Lucasfilm and Pixar, so I'm not really sure what he is.
Yeah.
There's no one else quite like him. He is weird, but I do quite like him. I'm always interested to hear what he says when I see him being interviewed for stuff. So, yeah, I understand the criticisms, but I think he's a big talent. And I do actually have quite a bit of time for him as well. Westy, what about you? George Lucas?
He's a very lucky man, isn't he?
Damning.
Let's be honest. Right place, right time, ideas man. He does THX, he tries to be Kubrick, he fails. American Graffiti tries his hand at the 50s kind of Happy Days kind of vibe, fails. And then he goes, right, well, what can I do here, right? I'll take Kurosawa, I'll take all of these classic Western elements, I'll base it in space, I'll have a princess, and I'll take the classic story that's been done 1 billion times. Didn't have a clue what he was doing. People had to come in and edit it. He's best mates with Spielberg. If I was best mates with Spielberg, I'd probably be a successful director. And De Palma giving him advice. He's like a big kid who wants to build a play den, but everyone around him's like an incredible carpenter. Like
Well, Harrison Ford was.
Well, there you go. That's why Harrison Ford's Han Solo. And do you know why he did nothing after Star Wars, Matt? Because he went, fuck me, I got away with murder there. Not doing that again.
Going to roll around in his money like Scrooge McDuck.
But yeah, it's the merchandising as well. He's a hell of a businessman. He's a hell of an ideas man. And I think he's out of his depth. Working with actors, he's out of his depth. Actually making stuff a reality, I think he needs other people to do that for him. But everyone, cast and crew in this, bring his vision to life. And it is an incredible vision.
So Westy, big fan?
Yeah, huge. He's in my top 5.
After graduating from the USC Film School in 1967, Lucas co-founded a filmmaking company with his big pal Francis Ford Coppola, so he was in there as well, helping
There's
out.
There's another one. Fuck me.
Called American Zoetrope. So with American Zoetrope, Lucas made THX 1138 in 1971, a societal science fiction movie which was a huge critical success but a commercial bomb. It did pique studios' interest though, and United Artists asked him if he had any more ideas. On the back of that, they gave Lucas a 2-picture deal. The first was American Graffiti, a coming-of-age comedy drama set in 1962, came out in 1973, and changed Lucas's life forever. So, do you guys like American Graffiti?
I really, really love American Graffiti. I think it's one where I will absolutely defend George Lucas on that film because I think it's great. And I think what's interesting about it is if you read what he was doing at film school, he was really into like non-narrative films. And I think that absolutely shows in American Graffiti, because it's not a film that's driven by the narrative at all. It's just a bunch of characters driving around and getting into different cars, going off with other people. The soundtrack is immense, and it's just got a really, really great atmosphere to it. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that one. I'm a huge fan of it.
I'm a fan of it as well. This is the one where it feels like a real director's film, doesn't it? You can really feel like it's been directed. It was also just a bit of a hit. On a budget of just $777,000, American Graffiti made $140 million.
Amazing.
In terms of budget to gross ratio, it was more than twice as successful as Star Wars.
Well, really?
Which is mental. That second film UA had given Lucas a deal for was what he described as a space opera that's a bit like a Western, a bit like James Bond. He loves Bond as a reference
He
point.
loves that one, doesn't he?
Every film.
Every film. And his output couldn't be any further from it.
At this point, Lucas had a 14-page treatment called The Star Wars, and UA passed on it. Universal passed. Disney passed. There was a division of Paramount called the Directors Company that was owned by Coppola, William Friedkin, and Peter Bogdanovich. Coppola gave the treatment to Friedkin, and Friedkin says about it, "Francis brought us this script, and I said, 'What the hell is this shit?'
Billy.
Who's going to direct this?" Francis said, "George," and I said, "I don't think so." I didn't believe George could pull it off, and I was wrong.
Oh, well, fair enough.
So Lucas then pitched the idea to the head of 20th Century Fox called Alan Ladd. On that pitch, Ladd says, "I had no idea what George was talking about, but I knew he was talented, so I invested in him," and he greenlit the film with an $8 million budget. It's also worth mentioning here the deal that Lucas struck with Fox. So he agreed to get paid $150,000 for writing and directing Star Wars, which wasn't a lot at all.
No.
On two conditions.
I know one of them was to get 40% of merchandise.
He got full rights.
For full rights? I thought it was 40%.
Yeah, he kept full rights to all the Star Wars merchandise, so toys, books, video games, clothes, everything. And the other one was that he got full rights and control over any sequels to Star Wars.
Oh, nice, right.
So merchandise for movies was worth nothing at the time, so Fox agreed, and they were actually quite pleased with that deal.
I bet.
In the last 43 years, that deal has made Lucas $6 billion.
Jesus Christ.
He's the richest filmmaker of all time.
Yeah.
So finally then, 3 years after American Graffiti, Lucas had the go-ahead for Star Wars. So what do we think of Lucas' work as the director of Star Wars?
I mean, it's his vision, isn't it? That's the thing. It's his real drive and vision, and there was a lot of problems on set. There was a lot of people disagreeing with the dialogue, and I don't think anyone enjoyed it. And I don't really think he was very good working with actors, but I think his whole personality is what Star Wars is, and I think if anyone else had tried to take on that script, it might have become a little bit more generic. It might have become a little bit more like Flash Gordon, because every film since then that's tried to rip it off, and there's been thousands, have never really found this tone and real excitement, and I think he brings that. So as the director on this, I think he's the only person who could have done A New Hope easily.
Wow. Praise from Westy for Lucas.
When it comes to this film, yeah, I have to, because it is his.
You know what? Let's give him some credit, because everything you see in Star Wars, everything you hear, the way it looks, the way it sounds, the world building, that's all his vision. And there must have been so much pressure on him from people saying, "Oh, George, come on, really? You want one of these robots to not speak a single word of English?" But he's bullheaded enough and determined enough to go, "No, that's where I want it. That's how it's going to work." He's almost naive. I suppose he's got a sense of innocence about him as a filmmaker to not be cynical about this universe. And that's why he does work as a fairy tale almost. And anyone with like a slightest bit of cynicism, but who might have been a better filmmaker, they wouldn't have made a better film.
Well, when you hear about the issues during production of the film that Lucas had to deal with, it's a surprise Star Wars came out at all, let alone was such a big hit. So some of those issues, the Tatooine scenes we mentioned earlier were filmed in Tunisia. On the first day of filming, Tunisia experienced its first major rainstorm in 50 years, delaying things. There were major issues with some of the technology, mainly R2, that delayed things. The later scenes were filmed at Elstree Studios in England. They had really strict working hours and wouldn't let Lucas shoot past 5 p.m. That delayed things. The film had been under budgeted and they ran out of money. So production was stopped for 2 weeks until Fox approved another $3 million. And the whole situation made Lucas ill. He was diagnosed with hypertension and exhaustion and told to reduce his stress levels. At this point, they had about 6 weeks left in production, and Alan Ladd came to Lucas and said he had to finish within 1 week. Lucas said, "That's not possible." And Ladd said, "Well, either you do it or we shut down production." So the crew was split into 3 units, and it was a massive race to bring it in on time, which they somehow managed to do. I mean, it's stressing me out just seeing all that.
Yeah.
The pressure he was under. So what do you think of that, and how Lucas and his team, to be fair, dealt with all those issues?
Well, to be fair, we've got the film, haven't we?
We have.
The film does work, so obviously they've got their heads down. And I do think the film always has this kind of slightly scrappy quality to it. It's not a really slick blockbuster like Raiders is. And I think that's probably a knock-on effect of that. So maybe if he'd had a bit longer, he would be a little bit slicker. But I'm not necessarily saying it would be better for it. Maybe that's what gives it its charm.
Yeah, because you hear about these films that have big production issues. There's Jaws, and both of them, obviously, 2 of the biggest hits of all time. Do you think that maybe helps sometimes, if there are issues they have to work with and work within limitations?
I think so, because I think it sharpens everyone's focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, limitations always breed creativity, don't they? So when you're given boundaries that you've got to stay inside of, then your creativity has to save you. And I think he's the man to do it. If anyone's a creative soul, I think it's George Lucas. He's, like we said, he's an ideas man. There was such a rush to finish it at the end, but if you watch the film from start to finish, you can't tell what was rushed to do in that last week or what was shot on the first day. It is all consistently brilliant.
Yeah, I know that maybe because of the stress he was under, or maybe because he calls himself an introvert, the main cast in Star Wars don't exactly lavish Lucas with praise when they talk about working with him.
No.
Have you heard much about this?
I have, yeah. Mark Hamill has went on and said if there was a way to make movies without actors, George would do it. The general consensus from the actors was that they found Lucas to be very uncommunicative as a director. He said his direction would usually be one of 2 things, either faster or more intense. And then because he was ill, he lost his voice for a couple of days on set, so the crew gave him a board that said faster. He turned it round and it said more intense.
There you go then. Just turn it with a board. You're laughing.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
In terms of the visual effects for the film, Lucas knew he needed to do things that had never been done before. He approached Doug Trumbull, who worked on 2001 and Silent Running, but he was already working on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, so Lucas just decided to set up his own company, as you do. He brought in Trumbull's assistant, John Dykstra, to head up this new company, hired a load of students, artists and engineers, put them in a warehouse in California, and called them Industrial Light and Magic. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, to be honest. We need groundbreaking visual effects, no one can do them, so I'll just set up ILM with a bunch of students. It's absolutely crazy. What do you think ILM's visual effects work is like in Star Wars? How does it hold up today, do you think?
Oh, it's still incredible. It's set a standard. And personally speaking, I always love practical effects work, not just CGI. There's something about it, just the kind of tactility of it. You know it's physically there. And I think this is some of the best, and how they blend it all. And the variety of work they do, from the crafts, from the TIE fighters to the Sandcrawler to the Death Star itself. I just think it's all wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before that Star Wars was under budgeted at $8 million and it rose to $11 million. To give a bit of context on that, the budget for Superman, which came out 1 year after Star Wars, was $50 million. So almost 5 times more than Star Wars. Today, I think Star Wars looks head and shoulders above Superman.
Oh, easily.
The space battles are great, but there's a shot near the start on Tatooine that you sort of mentioned there, Matt, where we see the Jawa Sandcrawler trundling through the desert. It's done with a scale model. It's only a few seconds, but that shot just blows me away. It looks like a real thing. Outstanding.
It does, yeah.
They blend it all really, really well. Sometimes you can see the model work, but I just love the way they have the practicals, like Matt was saying, and when everyone gets shot in the X-Wing battle at the end, and it cuts just at that right point, where they're in the cockpit and you get that kind of and then it cuts to the model work. It's so compelling. But like we said at the top, that opening scene still looks real.
It does. The Star Destroyers look amazing.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
For his work as director on Star Wars, Lucas was nominated for Best Director at the Oscars, and the film was nominated for Best Picture. They lost out on both to the same film. Do you know what that was?
Annie Hall, wasn't it?
Matt, you always get these. Every time.
When I go on Mastermind.
Yeah, Annie Hall, Woody Allen, Best Director. When Star Wars was released, Lucas had the biggest picture ever made on his hands. It was the highest grossing film of all time and a cultural phenomenon. After Star Wars, he oversaw the 2 Star Wars follow-ups, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and in 1981 produced Raiders of the Lost Ark after creating the character of Indiana Jones. So this is my question. Up to this point, early 80s, Lucas' output as a filmmaker was THX 1138, American Graffiti, the Star Wars trilogy, and Raiders. incredible filmography. After this, aside from producing a couple of good indie films, nothing. Fell off a cliff, quality-wise. So why do you think that was? Do you think Star Wars burned him out? Or do you think he was never that good in the first place and got lucky?
Like I said when you first asked us, he's a lucky man. And he's surrounded by the right people. And he finished Star Wars, and I think that process and what it did to him physically and mentally and emotionally, I think he didn't want to go through that again. So he got away with it, and it was a huge success. It was a phenomenon. And he just sits back. I mean, if I made one film that made $40 billion, yeah, I would do fuck all as well. I think he's just sat back behind the scenes and he's just really, really enjoyed his life. Good lad.
Star Wars was a massive game changer. Jaws was the first summer blockbuster, but I think Star Wars really defined the blockbuster and still defines what the blockbuster is. In terms of movie merchandising, Star Wars created that as an industry in its own right, and it's a key part of any blockbuster campaign now. Any blockbuster film has toys, video games, books, clothes. What I would like people to take from Lucas, especially young filmmakers, is that he had this vision and did whatever it took to make that happen. He took risks when he was young. He set up companies. He went for it 100%, and Star Wars would never have existed if he hadn't done that. I think if Lucas can make Star Wars in 1977, just about anything is possible.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, very true.
So we've covered out quite a lot on George Lucas there. Critically acclaimed bombs, critically acclaimed hits, cultural icons, and setting up seminal companies left, right, and centre. Whether you're a fan of his or you're not, I don't think anybody can deny the significance of his career or that he has his place in Hollywood history.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
The cast.
The main cast of Star Wars is quite an eclectic mix. Oscar winners, horror icons, complete unknowns, and future A-list movie stars. The cast list is pretty huge, so we're going to focus on the main good guys. Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and Alec Guinness are coming up, but I think a good place to start is with the main character, don't you think?
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
So Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker, a Tatooine-dwelling moisture farm boy when we first meet him, who goes on quite the adventure. After his surrogate parents, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, are murdered by the Empire, he goes off with Obi-Wan, rescues the princess, and learns the ways of the Force to blow up the Death Star. What do we think of Luke Skywalker as a character, first of all?
He's very, very archetypal, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Young, innocent, naive kid who's seen nothing of the world. And I actually think it's quite a brave thing to do to make him the main character, because on paper you would think he seems really, really boring and quite bland. And the temptation must have been to kind of give him a bit of an edge, to kind of rough him up a bit, make him a bit scruffy in one way or the other. But Lucas doesn't. He knows that for Luke to complete his arc in this film, he has to start off like that, which is why the ending of the film has the impact that he does. So actually, from what looks like slightly shaky beginnings, I think as a character, he ends up leaping off the page by the end.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of Luke when I was younger. I thought he was a bit boring. He's a right goody two-shoes, isn't he?
Yeah. I don't think I would like him in real life, to be honest.
In recent years, though, I have warmed to him a lot more. As a character who grows, not just in Star Wars, but in the 3 films, he's got a brilliant arc. And I think he's really well written for the most part. I do like him more in Empire, where I think he's a bit more mature, there's more conflict within him. But nowadays, I do like him in Star Wars as well. Like you said there, Matt, he is your classic protagonist, isn't he?
I've always loved Luke Skywalker. He's always had that real kind of energy that I always recognised. Could be seen as immaturity or naivety, I guess. But it's probably the same as, like Matt said, it's probably the same attitude George Lucas had making the film. He's going to be a pilot in the rebellion and he's going to blow up the Death Star, you know. And even when they're just sitting there and we go, oh, yeah, we're going to go and blow the Death Star up. He's like, well, I used to bullseye womp rats back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters. Couldn't get over it. So, but yeah, mate, but that's the Death Star. But I think he's a really good character that I could relate to when I was younger, being stuck somewhere and you wanted to just go and see other things. It reminds me when I couldn't go and see Batman in 1989 because it was 12. All my friends have seen it because we're a little bit older, and I'm like, I'm going to see this no matter what.
What, you're comparing that to Luke blowing up the Death Star?
Yeah, that's exactly the same. No, just that feeling of wanting to do things and feeling restricted by other people, or feeling restricted by rules, or governed, or it doesn't tap into that youthful vitality that I think he brings to it. I think that character is great because you want to follow him. I think he's really good.
Well, Lucas said casting Star Wars was a year-long process with auditions every 5 minutes. and he held what he called a cattle call with his pal Brian De Palma. De Palma was auditioning for Carrie at the same time, so they joined forces and held joint auditions. And Lucas knew right from the start that he wanted an unknown actor to play Luke. And there were some names that were unknown at the time, but that we now know. Have you heard any of those?
I haven't, I don't think.
So William Catt, who De Palma cast in Carrie, was a contender.
Yeah.
And Lucas also considered Charles Martin Smith.
Right.
Charles Martin Smith?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Why?
Worked with him on American Graffiti, and Martin Smith most well known probably for playing Oscar Wallace in The Untouchables. He would have been really short for a stormtrooper, Martin Smith.
He would have been like, wouldn't be much taller than R2.
Also, Robert Englund auditioned for the part of Luke. He became famous in the 80s for playing a very famous horror movie character. Freddy Krueger. After his audition, Englund had a moan to his pals about how badly he'd done in the audition, but said to one of them, who was also an actor, "Actually, I think you'd be a really good fit for it." That pal was Mark Hamill.
Wow.
Hamill auditioned, and Lucas said about his audition, because of the strange words they were reading, so many actors read the part a little tongue-in-cheek, with a nod and a wink. I didn't want that. Mark threw himself into the word and read the part sincerely. So on the back of that, Lucas cast him as Luke. So how do you think Mark Hamill does as Luke Skywalker in the film?
I think you said it there. I think there's a sincerity to him. He does seem very genuine.
Yeah.
And the emotion that he delivers, I think, really, really works for the character. And you take him seriously. He could have been really annoying in the wrong hands. He could have just been a right pain in the arse. You need that level of belief, but at the same time to deliver that emotion and that excitement at the same time. I think he does really, really well. When they even mention the rebellion, it's like, the rebellion against the Empire. And then the next scene, he's like looking at the two sunsets and he's almost crying, and you just totally buy it. Yeah, I think he's really, really good.
It was probably a very difficult role to read for other actors because of the amount of jargon and the amount of sheer faith they've just got to have in what the finished film is going to be. But the great thing about Hamill, he just leans into it. He doesn't try to be modern about it. He buys into the character and the story as much as George Lucas does. And that's why he works. And like I said about the character in general, at the end, you're just so compelled by him. You're so caught up in him. And that's got a lot to do with just Hamill really believing in the character.
Well, Hamill's also said that he didn't have much faith that Star Wars would be a hit. He tells a story about Christmas 1976. He and Carrie Fisher spent a weekend together in New York. They went to see a film, and one of the trailers was for Star Wars. So nobody knew what it was at the time. And when the trailer finished, somebody shouted out, "Coming soon to CBS."
Was it Brian De Palma?
Written on the driveway.
William Fricken. Shit.
Well, after Star Wars, Hamill returned as Luke in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, of course, and also in the new Disney Star Wars trilogy. But mostly he found himself a bit typecast and never appeared in another movie as big as Star Wars again. The Big Red One, which was a Sam Fuller World War II movie from 1980, was his most acclaimed. But mostly Hamill's carved out a career for himself as a voiceover artist, where he's quite well known for playing the Joker in the Batman animated series.
Yeah.
Have you heard him as the Joker?
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he is. He's really great.
I know a lot of Batman fans, I think, see he's their favourite Joker, and there's been quite a few great ones. To end on Mark Hamill, I think a quote from the man himself is fitting. About Star Wars, Mark Hamill says, "People think being remembered for one character is a negative thing, but I don't. I didn't expect to be remembered for anything. I'm Luke Skywalker, and I always will be."
Nice. Lovely.
Well, yeah, good guy.
A valid criticism some people have of Star Wars is that it doesn't have enough female or non-white main characters. The one major female character it does have, though, she's a doozy.
Oh, yeah.
Carrie Fisher plays Princess Leia Organa, a major figure in the Rebel Alliance. Taken prisoner by the Empire in the opening scene, she's rescued from the Death Star by Luke, Han and Chewie, all the while dishing out verbal abuse to just about everyone she meets, and masterminds the X-Wing assault on the Death Star. So what do you think of Princess Leia as a character?
Well, let's give George Lucas some credit here again, because it would have been just so easy to make a damsel in distress, and that was it. But she's anything but. Isn't intimidated by anyone. And even when she's rescued, even then she just takes shots straight away. She looks at like these two clowns who've got them in the worst trouble. And it's like, right, you do. Follow me. I know what I'm doing. You don't, so shut up and listen. And I just love her for that. And for me, she's the soul of the film.
Yeah, well, nowadays she's my favourite character. She has got some serious attitude going on. She meets Vader, starts giving him shit. She meets Tarkin and starts giving him shit. Yeah. She meets Han and starts giving him shit immediately. Yeah. She's a great judge of character. She gives shit to all the dickheads. Yeah. I said I think Luke's better in Empire, but I think Leia's maybe better in Star Wars. I think she's fantastic in this film.
She's just like you guys have said, she's totally badass. Just doesn't take any shit whatsoever. It's one of my favourite bits when she just takes the gun off them. It's like somebody's got to save her skins.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. It's just brilliant. And the way that she reacts when the door opens and Luke comes in and she's just lying there. Like, it could be anyone coming in. She's just been interrogated by a needle in the scene previous. But she doesn't give a fuck. She's like, yeah, come on in. Kill us then, whatever. You buy her as this figure. The final scene when they're getting the medals and they're standing there and you just see her in the outfit and her hair's done differently and she's standing there and she's getting the respect from everybody and she's playing her role. You totally buy that.
Oh, yeah,
you think, oh, that's what she does. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But behind the scenes, you know, she can also kick your ass. I love her.
Well, as was the case with Luke, there was a huge casting process to find Princess Leia. Thousands of actresses auditioned, many of who would go on to be famous. So there's a lot of names here. So hold on to your butts. Karen Allen, Nancy Allen, Kim Basinger, Bonnie Bedelia, Glenn Close, Gina Davis, Farrah Fawcett, Melanie Griffith, Barbara Hershey, Angelica Houston, Margot Kidder, Jessica Lange, Jane Seymour, Sybil Shepherd, Sissy Spacek, Meryl Streep, Kathleen Turner, Sigourney Weaver, Diane Wiest, Linda Blair, and Deborah Winger all auditioned for the role of Princess Leia.
Wow.
Do you like any of those names?
Not as good as Carrie Fisher, no.
Well, there was also one other very famous actress turned the role down.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So Jodie Foster.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she wanted to do it, but she was already working on 2 other Disney films, so had to decline. Would you change that if you could?
I don't know. She's incredible in Taxi Driver, right?
Yeah.
So she's got the chops to do it. Yeah, I think she would have been pretty good.
Oh, she would have been fantastic. I mean, she's a better actress, I think, than Carrie Fisher, isn't she? But
yeah,
Carrie Fisher as Leia. I mean, how can you change that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, don't change it.
I can't. Good. So then, Carrie Fisher came into audition. She'd only appeared in one movie at this point, that was Shampoo, in 1975, but she was already pretty well known still because of who her parents were.
Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher.
Yeah, singer-actor Eddie Fisher was her father, and her mother was the actress Debbie Reynolds, who'd been in a Hollywood phenomenon of her own in Singing in the Rain in 1952. So when she went to audition for Star Wars, Lucas said that he liked Carrie Fisher straight away because when she walked in, they asked her, "Are you Debbie Reynolds' daughter?" And she replied, "No, Debbie Reynolds is my mother."
Awesome. That just sums her up, doesn't it?
To keep the budget down as well, a story about Carrie Fisher that they had to fly everyone to Tunisia in coach.
Right.
So Debbie Reynolds rang up George Lucas personally and said, "How dare my daughter fly coach? This is completely unacceptable." And Carrie Fisher was in the room when he took the call and she took the phone off George Lucas and she just went, "Ma'am, I want to fly coach now. Fuck off." So she was Leia naturally, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Lucas loved her audition, especially one test screening she did with Harrison Ford, so she was cast as Princess Leia. So what do we think of Carrie Fisher as Leia in Star Wars?
She is Princess Leia, that's it. She just completely owns the role. I think she's so recognisable as a character. I think all of her outfits are great, her hair's great. Her whole performance is just totally believable. It was when I very first saw it when I was young, and I was just thinking, what's these strange feelings that I've got? This is brand new, and that was Carrie Fisher.
There's her legacy then.
Yep, thank you.
There's actually a J.J. Abrams quote about Carrie Fisher where he said, "Carrie Fisher isn't a badass because she played Princess Leia. Princess Leia is a badass because she was played by Carrie Fisher."
Absolutely right.
I think she's brilliant, completely irreplaceable.
Yeah.
It's interesting that list of actresses you went through there, because if I'm being really honest, I would never say Carrie Fisher was a great actress, and I think there was certainly a lot of actresses on there who I would rate better as an actress, but what Carrie Fisher was an absolute star. Obviously, coming from the family she did, she just had movie star charisma from the get-go. And at 21, to be going in there and holding her own with people like Peter Cushing, who's got 30, 40 years of acting behind him, it just shows what an absolute star she was. And out of the 3 main characters, I could kind of see maybe other actors in there, not with Leia, no chance.
Yeah, well, she was a star and she was apparently an absolute joy on the set as well, and everybody loved her. She does have a very famous hairstyle in Star Wars as well, obviously, the bagel buns. How does that look today, do you think?
Iconic.
It is iconic.
I mean, silly in some ways, but you wouldn't have it any other way, would you?
Exactly. It's the same as all the costumes, though. Like, it shouldn't really work, but it really does.
Well, she didn't like it, Carrie Fisher, and she used to tease Lucas on the set by calling her hair the buns of Navarone. She said, I'm not sure why, but George would hate it when I said that. Of course, that just made me say it all the more. And she also didn't like her costume very much because Lucas wouldn't let her wear any underwear, which is a bit weird.
Yeah, she was quite famous going on record about this, and she said, as we all know, there is no underwear in space, and she also said that when she brought this to George Lucas, he explained it away in his typical way by saying, oh, well, you know, in space you become weightless, but then your body expands, but your bra doesn't, so you will end up being strangled by your own bra.
I mean, that is just crazy talk.
Yeah, I mean, to think about it in that level of detail, but it's just typical Fisher. I love how her outlook on life just always turned any complaint or negative into a positive, because then when she wrote about that in her memoir, she said, I wanted reported in my obituary that I drowned in moonlight, strangled by my own bra.
Drowned in moonlight. I fucking love that.
Well, yeah, that's it. It's a lovely phrase, and then a great punchline.
I think when she passed away, some online publications did actually have that as the headline of the article.
Yeah, they did, yeah, I remember.
Too right. Respect her wishes, absolutely.
After Star Wars, Carrie Fisher returned as Leia in the sequels like Mark Hamill, and also like Hamill, she found herself a little bit typecast, though not to the extent that he was. She made a lot of TV movies and appeared in roles in The Blues Brothers, The Burbs, and When Harry Met Sally. She was a talented writer, like we said, and won a BAFTA for adapting her own novel, Postcards from the Edge, in 1991, and also did a lot of script consulting as well. Entertainment Weekly called her the most sought-after script doctor in town. Tragically, though, Carrie Fisher passed away in 2016 at just 60 years old. Do you remember hearing that news?
Yeah, really do. Just after Christmas.
It was horrible. There was a lot behind the scenes that she was plagued with, and you can't be that emotional without feeling something. And I think that really hurt her, and it was detrimental to her. And I think, you know, she was dealt some shit cards in her life. But whenever she was at Comic-Con and conventions, and if anyone had done any original art, she would go around all of the stalls and buy original art from anybody doing anything. She was an absolute sweetheart, but she was troubled, and unfortunately, that's what it brings.
When she passed away, there was obviously an outpouring of grief across the globe, including from her Star Wars friends. I've got some quotes. Have you got the Kleenex ready here?
Oh boy,
Don't do it again.
So Harrison Ford said, Carrie was one of a kind, brilliant, original, funny, my breath away. My life would have been far emptier without her. I am grateful for the laughter, the wisdom, the kindness, and even the bratty, self-indulgent crap my beloved space twin gave me through the years. Thanks, Carrie. I love you, MH. And George Lucas said, the whole family will miss her, and nobody more than me. From the moment I met her, Carrie was, and always will be, my princess.
Oh, amazing. Chop with onions here.
Yeah. Lovely sentiment.
To end with the great lady herself, Carrie Fisher said about Star Wars, people still ask me if I knew Star Wars was going to be that big of a hit. Yes, we all knew. The only one who didn't know was George.
Still giving him shit.
Yeah.
Leia follows me round like a vague smell. People see me and they squeal like seals stranded on the beach.
Amazing.
The third of the three main heroes in the movie is Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, a space pirate and best friend of walking carpet Chewbacca. He gets mixed up in Luke's story when he agrees to take him to Alderaan in the Millennium Falcon and goes from scoundrel smuggler to hero when he turns up at the last minute to help Luke destroy the Death Star.
For me, as soon as he enters the film, this is where everything clicks into place.
Yeah.
Because before now, it's kind of jumped around from character to character. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of kind of mythical stuff being discussed. And taking the nostalgia away from it, because obviously I know how it plays out. Han is the first character who I instantly understand, and I get where he's coming from. Right, okay. He's like every character I've seen in a Western. He's like Jason Robards in Once Upon a Time in the West. He's someone who will pretty much do anything as long as he's paid, and he's with the good guys, but I don't know how much I'm going to trust him. And he just levels everything for me. He's the character I just hook onto and I think, right, okay, I'm going to enjoy the rest of this film now because he's in it.
Yeah, he's just so charismatic. He looks great in that space waistcoat as well.
Oh, I love it.
Space Code.
In terms of the dynamic between the three main characters, which is brilliant, he's totally integral. He's the only character maybe that's a bit grey. Everybody else is either a fascist or a goody two-shoes, and he's sort of somewhere in the middle.
He's my favourite character in the film.
Great.
It's just effortlessly cool. I remember the first time I saw it and I thought that this is the guy. Here he is. Amazing. But watching it so many times since, it's dawned on us that he is the audience. He is us. It's us in that world, and we're just going, the Force? Fuck you, talking about?
Yeah.
Like, give us somebody, I'll take you where you want it. Alderaan, yeah, no problem. Yeah, he's my favourite character by a long stretch. He's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, Lucas said he based the personality of Han on Francis Ford Coppola.
Really?
Yeah.
Just panicking in the Philippine jungle. Having a heart attack.
And his first plans for Han Solo were that he was going to be played by a black actor. So
Yeah.
Billy D. Williams auditioned, and Lucas settled on Glyn Turman, who's most well known for Cooley High. But Lucas then changed his mind and went after a white actor. No way you'd get away with that now. No way.
No.
Twitter would have cancelled Lucas there, for sure.
Yeah.
Lucky man. Again.
So in these new auditions, there were again loads of names up for the part of Han. Have you heard any of those?
A few, yeah.
I think Christopher Walken for me is the standout. That would have
Yeah, I'd
been amazing.
love to see Walking in there.
Christopher Walken was one, Nick Nolte, Sylvester Stallone, John Travolta, James Woods were all considered, Kurt Russell.
Yeah, that's good.
I'd love to see Kurt Russell in
Yeah,
there.
he would have been good. Westy, you like this one? Chevy Chase.
Oh, of course.
I mean, what? Imagine that.
Ridiculous.
No.
Absolutely ludicrous.
Well, James Caan, Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino and Burt Reynolds all turned the role down. Do you like any of those names as Han? De Niro calling everyone motherfuckers.
Pacino, like, she made the castle run in less than 12 parsecs. Ooh-ah!
Well, Pacino said it was mine for the taking, but I didn't understand the script.
Nobody
No
did.
one did, Al. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford had worked with Lucas before on American Graffiti, and the year after that he'd been in Coppola's The Conversation, but the roles then dried up, and Ford, with a young family, went into an honest job. We mentioned it earlier.
Carpenter.
He became a carpenter. But because of their previous ties, Lucas asked him to help out in the screen tests for Luke and Leia and read the part of Han Solo. And during those tests, Lucas realised that Ford was perfect for Han. I mean, have you seen any of those screen tests? He's already Han Solo.
Oh, yeah, effortlessly.
So what do you think then of Harrison Ford as Han Solo in Star Wars?
For me, he's just so charismatic. He's just electric. His outfits are amazing. I'm still hoping for the day where I can actually wear them boots. The leather jacket he wears at the end. The jacket he's got on, it's the red stripes down the side.
Yeah.
I think he totally owns it. Like I said before, I think he is that character. He's like 33, 34 at the time of this. So at that point, he's like, well, I need to get a proper job. This isn't quite working out. And you can see that. You can see he's a bit more world-weary than everybody else. He's a bit sick of everybody's shit. He's a bit sick of the whole carry-on and the whole mythology of it. He just doesn't buy into it. But I think he brings a lot of his own personality to it, and he's really funny. He's really dry. That bit when he runs after the stormtroopers, turns around the corner, and there's fucking loads of them, and he's like, ah! Then runs back after Chewie. I could watch that on a loop for about 4 days.
I like the bit where they first arrive at the Death Star. They're in the control room and Obi-Wan goes off to shut down the tractor beam. As soon as he's out of the room, Chewie's like, ah, and Han goes, you said it, Chewie. Where did you dig up that old fossil? It's like so brutal, harsh as fuck.
Yeah. It is. Do you know what Chewie said there?
No, what?
The old man's lost his mind.
Can you speak Wookiee?
Yep. Just like you can speak Klingon.
I mean, he's just got everything that the character needs, doesn't he? He's got the charisma, he's got the confidence, just the way he struts into the cantina and just sits down, just like, right, you're all going to listen to me, and I'm not going to put up with anyone's shit here. I don't have the time to do that. I love how that cynicism just contrasts with how, like, straightforward Hamill and Guinness are playing it. He just brings that spark. And the only other person I would seriously be tempted to see in that role is Kurt Russell, because I think he's very similar presence.
I don't think we can mention Han without talking about his sidekick and co-pilot, the 7'5" Wookiee Chewbacca, played by Peter Mayhew.
Mm-hmm. Again, wonderful, and I think, like the droid, he's the perfect way into the story when you're a kid. I mean, certainly when I was a kid, I wasn't that bothered about the human characters. I wanted to see robots, and I want to see aliens, and, the more bizarre, the better. So, like, when another human comes along, but his best mate looks like some kind of weird cross between an ape and a bear, but he can handle himself, and he's a co-pilot, I'm all over that shit. Yeah. Chewie, he's obviously incredible. Everybody loves Chewie.
I mean, how does this character work? A 7'5" walking furball who only communicates like, "Rah." It should be completely laughable, like genuinely laugh out loud bad, but it works.
Yeah, it should.
You buy him as a character. I mean, how?
Yeah.
I'm like actually asking. I need to know. I don't get it. I don't know how it works.
Again, credit Lucas for that, for believing in it.
I love Chewie. The thing that I get from it is that he modelled him on his dog, who he named Indiana Jones after. And I'm thinking, what the fuck did his dog look like? It's on its hind legs with a little bag on. Absolutely mental. But yeah, I love him. And there's another bit in the cantina where Obi-Wan turns around and he's like, Chewbacca here is first mate on a ship that might help with. How the fuck does he know that? He's speaking Wookiee all the way through. I think he's like sitting there just going, me mate Han Solo's over there if you want to go over. But Han Solo doesn't know he can speak English. So he just doesn't do anything. But I love the character. I love the fact that he can do anything. Get the ship started, bring it over here. He follows on with what Han's saying and he backs him up at every single point. But he has got his own mind. And if I was going to have like a compadre to go through space with and I was a smuggler and I might be in a little bit of trouble, it would definitely be Chewbacca.
Absolutely.
I think their relationship is so perfectly formed that even though you don't see the scene, I can picture the scene in my head of Chewie getting on the Han at the end to make him come back.
Yeah.
It's all down to Chewie, just giving him shit, or just sitting there in silence.
With his arms folded, just refusing to get in the Falcon.
When studio executives first saw the dailies as well, I know that they were concerned that Chewie had no clothes on. And they said to Lucas, we're not sure about him walking around naked all the time. Is there any chance he can wear Bermuda shorts? But Lucas put them off by saying, no, it's all right. Chewie doesn't have a penis. And they were like, all right, okay, that's fine. No shorts required then.
Yeah, that's fine. Like Donald Duck.
Well, after Star Wars, to say that typecasting wasn't an issue for Harrison Ford would be an understatement. The film launched him to becoming one of the biggest movie stars of the last 50 years. He returned as Han in Empire and Return of the Jedi, and whilst playing Han, he was also cast as Indiana Jones, his second all-time iconic character. Other big films followed, to name some: Blade Runner, Witness, where he was nominated for an Oscar, Working Girl, Patriot Games, Presumed Innocent, The Fugitive, Air Force One, all big films with Ford in the lead. Do you like any of those ones?
I love Witness. I think that's a really great film. I'm a big fan of Peter Weir, and I think that's one of his best, and I think it's definitely one of Ford's.
Well, with Star Wars being just a starting point for his career, really, Harrison Ford views Star Wars a little differently to the other cast members. He says about it, "My life was changed completely by the opportunities that came to me because of Star Wars, and I am forever grateful because of that."
Oh, nice.
The final main cast member we're going to talk about wasn't an unknown actor. Far from it. Sir Alec Guinness plays Obi-Wan Kenobi, a wise old Jedi who whisks Luke off on his adventure, teaches him the ways of the Force, and then dies on the Death Star at the hands of Darth Vader. So, what do you think of the old fossil, Westy, Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I love him. He's like your grander, isn't he? He's just like really like...
He's not like my grand.
I didn't mean you personally. But he's got that kind of real air of trustworthiness. You trust him. You trust the character. You believe what he says. You don't think he's manipulating anybody. You think he's honest. He's down the line. He's got a history. You buy into it. And he brings a real classic vibe to it. After they've been to the Sandcrawler when it's been attacked and Luke runs away and he's going to go back because he thinks they've led him back home, and he's like, no, look, it's too dangerous. Like, you totally buy that.
He's your classic mentor character, isn't he? Obi-Wan, stone cold classic. I think Lucas pretty much plucked Gandalf out of Lord of the Rings and dropped him in here. I wouldn't call him a favourite to watch on screen, but in terms of the film, he's totally essential. It's Luke's story, and without Obi-Wan, Luke has no story. He starts Luke's story, basically. Takes him from Tatooine and then teaches him the Force. And the way he dies at the end of the second act, classic mentor moment as well. I think he's a great character. Fantastic.
I love his voiceover from that as well, from then on.
Yeah, so Luke starts hearing these voices. Do you think it's a bit weird that Luke just accepts it that Obi-Wan's speaking beyond the grave?
Of course it is.
It is a bit like, isn't it?
It's also weird that he's just been hit by a lightsaber and disappears.
Yeah, he's like Lucas, and he's a very archetypal character, which Lucas loves. And again, like Luke, he just makes him work on the page, makes him work on screen, and he really grounds the film. He gives it gravitas. He sells the concept of the Force. He's a bit of a wily old fox as well. I love how he sorts shit out at the canteen as soon as it kicks off. He's straight in there. So he's got a bit more to them than meets the eye. Is he a favourite character? Not really. I don't think he would have had much of an arc beyond this film. But I think for what he needs to do, for what he needs to carry, for what he needs to express as a character, he fulfills it really well, to the point where he's so iconic. And you mentioned Gandalf there, John, who obviously was well before Obi-Wan, but when those films came out, I imagine a lot of people watching that would go, oh, okay, right, Gandalf, he's the Obi-Wan of this story, because that's how iconic he's become.
Well, Lucas knew that Obi-Wan had to bring a certain amount of gravitas, like we mentioned there, to the film, so he always wanted a known actor to play him. Again, inspired by Kurosawa, he thought about casting Toshiro Mifune, who appeared in 16 Kurosawa movies.
Oh, wow.
According to Mifune's daughter, Mifune turned the part down because, in her words, he was concerned about how the film would look and that it would cheapen the image of the samurai. At the time, sci-fi movies still looked quite cheap as the effects were not advanced, and he had a lot of samurai pride. So Lucas turned to England and the acclaimed Alec Guinness to play Obi-Wan. Before Star Wars, Guinness was an Oscar winner for The Bridge on the River Kwai from 1957 and had been nominated for 4 more and appeared in classics like The Man in the White Suit, The Lady Killers, Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah, I think it's been quite well documented that he took the role based on 2 distinct factors. He was a big fan of American Graffiti, like you guys.
Yeah.
But he read the script, even though he didn't like the dialogue, but he felt compelled to finish it. So the story was taking him all the way to the final page. And I think that's what convinced him. He's like, well, you know, I'm a little bit past it now. If this is what the kids are doing, then I'll play that role. I'll speak that dialogue. I'll do the best job that I possibly can. I don't have to understand it, but I feel compelled by it.
I know that he had one condition when he took the role, though. He said that he wouldn't do any publicity to promote the film. And the studio agreed on the proviso that they reduce his salary slightly and give him 2% of the film's profits instead. He didn't want to do that, but reluctantly agreed. And then Lucas gave him a further 0.25% by way of saying thanks for improving the dialogue through the shoot.
Right.
Okay.
That 2.25% ended up being worth $18 million.
Wow.
So Guinness was in. So how do you think he does as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Matt?
Very iconic. Can't really imagine anyone bringing as much depth that Guinness does. I mean, Guinness is just a wonderful, wonderful actor anyway, and you could probably give him any old garbage to say and he would sell it.
Which is what they've done here.
Which is what they've done here. He sells it so eloquently. And just think of like where he's come from, how like classically trained he is, and now he's got scenes with, you know, a guy sitting inside a little robot suit. And he sells that dialogue. He's working with first-time actors, pretty much, and he deals with them beautifully. And with relatively limited screen time, he just makes Obi-Wan such an indelible and iconic figure.
Yeah, he does bring that gravitas that the character needs, I think, doesn't he? I think he's great. I mean, a fantastic actor, obviously, as Matt said. I don't think Obi-Wan was a challenge to him in any way, to be honest.
No.
I think he was on easy street. He seems totally comfortable, though, in what, compared to his other big roles, is completely ridiculous. He doesn't seem out of place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's excellent for me.
Yeah, I think that's why he didn't like it as much, because I don't feel he felt that there was a lot that he put into it, because he didn't have to. He's got to trust his natural ability, and that's what happens here. You know, the bit when he does the mind trick on the Stormtrooper in Mos Eisley, when he's just, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And just them little hand movements, it's all very underplayed. Could have been really ridiculous, that scene. It could have just been like, right, this is the Force, it's like boom. But he just plays it down, he plays everything down. And I think his performance is really, really, it's really measured, but it's really subtle.
Yeah, apparently he was a consummate professional on set as well. George Lucas always praised him for his work ethic and said that he inspired the younger cast and crew to work harder. And Harrison Ford, who was still learning at the time, I've got a quote from him where he said, "It was fascinating for me to watch Alec Guinness. He was always prepared, always professional, always very kind to the other actors. He had a very clear head about how to serve the story. That influenced me a lot."
Yeah, massive.
So he was an absolute professional on set, but it is probably as well known as his performance is the fact that he pretty much hated the whole experience. Yeah. And while he kind of kept that off the set and he didn't kind of blabber to other actors or have a whinge at them, he had a friend back home who was writing letters to, a lady called Anne Kaufman, where he was just basically going on and on about how much he wasn't enjoying the shoot. So I've got a couple of quotes from these letters here for you.
Yeah.
So the first one, just before production starts: "My dear Anne, new rubbish dialogue reaches me every day and none of it makes my character clear or even bearable. I just think of the lovely bread and that keeps me going. I must off to the studio now to work with the dwarf who has to wash in a bidet. And, and your countrymen, Mark Hamill and Tennyson Ford."
What?
Yeah. Tennyson Ford, a rangy, languid young man who is probably intelligent and amusing. God, they make me feel 90.
Yeah, he hated all of it afterwards, didn't he? It's like a really good story that I read. Like a fan comes up to him and exclaims, "Oh, I've seen Star Wars over 100 times. Can I have your autograph?" And he went, "I'll give you my autograph if you never watch it again."
Brutal. Yeah, I mean, he hated Star Wars, Alec Guinness. Why do you think that was?
You know, you're talking about a guy who's made several films with David Lean, and he's worked with the likes of Peter O'Toole and Peter Sellers and Omar Sharif. And then imagine to have that experience, but then to see it become so massive and so many people adore it. And especially when he's got so many like iconic roles before this that a lot of people probably had never seen or heard of, and he's probably a bit resentful about that.
Well, after Star Wars, Guinness returned for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Just for the lovely bread, no doubt. And Passage to India from 1984 was the last major film of note he was in. So to end with another quote from Alec Guinness on the film. This one's also quite a bit grumpy. He said, "Star Wars is staggering as spectacle and technically brilliant, exciting and warm-hearted. The battle scenes at the end go on for 5 minutes too long, and some of the dialogue is excruciating, and it is far too noisy. But it remains a vivid experience."
Hell, I think he liked it, mate. He was just a bit pissed off.
So, big exploration of the major cast members of Star Wars there. Career-defining roles for Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. One of two defining roles for Harrison Ford. And whether he likes it or not, it's probably the role Alec Guinness is most known for nowadays as well.
Yep,
I
definitely.
mean, I don't know why I'm saying whether he likes it or not. He definitely doesn't like that.
The middle.
The second act of Star Wars is where things start to really move, and we've got a couple of great scenes to talk about here. The rescue of Princess Leia and the detention level shootout in the Death Star is coming up, but first we're staying on Tatooine and heading to a wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious. So after Luke finds the charred remains of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru at the hands of Imperial stormtroopers, he decides to go with Obi-Wan on his mission to Alderaan, and they head to Mos Eisley Spaceport to find a ship. In the moments that follow in the cantina, we discover that jazz music exists no matter...
I think I have. It's just a big market, isn't it? Fantastic scene. It's lifted straight out of a Western. It's an old school saloon. You've got all the bits that you would expect, sliding drinks across the bar. All these really weird characters that are really excellent. But I think Lucas was struggling a little bit to fill everything up, so he just said to Rick Baker, "Just take the masks off the shelf." So it's just stuff he had lying about, and he was just creating all of these characters. I love the vibe of it. I love the feeling of it. The songs, it is catchy. That tune is pretty catchy. Again, it's just one of them things that I said before, another really refreshing surprise. When you want it to go somewhere else, it goes somewhere else, and you're like, okay, so I'm in a Western now. But the thing that strikes me about this sequence is that we're an hour in here.
Yeah.
Like, we're halfway through the film, and it never feels like we're halfway through. This always feels like one of the opening sequences.
It does.
Because there's so much crammed into the last hour, and so much that we've been drawn into in the first hour. It still baffles me that this is halfway through.
Well, the first bit that always gets me, and it makes me laugh, is when they come in with the droids, and the bomb says, "No, we don't serve their kind in here." They're serving every other fucker in there who's causing that row, causing a fight. You know, what's he got against droids? Honestly, I do not get that. But no, I love the scene. As I said when I was talking about Han, this is where the film really starts to build momentum for me. This is where everything comes together. You know what the mission is. You know what the characters are doing now. Mm-hmm. But the actual place itself, I love how dingy it is. I love how it's not overlit. I just want to see more of the aliens, which is a real positive. I just want to hang out at this place, even if it's just 5 more minutes, because it just looks great. You just want to, like, take it all in, and you can almost feel the dirt on your fingernails in this place. It's just got real, like, character to it. I think it's a great setting, and all works really, really well.
Yeah, I love those shots when we first get to the cantina, the band's playing, and it cuts from one weird-looking alien to another quickly just to establish how mental the place is. And I especially like the bit at the bar where Luke gets into the fight. That exchange where the guy's like, he doesn't like you. I don't like you either. Luke's already out of his depth, and he's only like 3 miles down the road from where he lives.
So one of the most talked about and debated scenes in Star Wars history, basically, is Greedo shooting first. What do you guys think about this? Because when I first saw it, obviously it wasn't the special editions, and it wasn't the special edition that came out again in 2004. So there's a couple of different versions. The first one is just, yes, I bet you have. Boom, he's out of it. That's cool as fuck.
It is.
The second one is like Han digitally moves his head. Yeah, he's like, he shot first, and then the last one they did, because there was such uproar about it, they both shoot at the same time. Yeah. So it's like, well, no, just leave it. Why did Lucas have to fuck around with stuff that's absolutely perfect? It's like he tries to just lighten everything that's got a bit of an ominous dark tone. You like that about Han Solo? He doesn't take any shit. He's not just going to sit there and just listen to this guy who's after him. You know, for a fact he's a bad guy. You want to see him shoot first every single time. So for me, it's one of them sequences that it just needed to be as it was, and Lucas needed to believe in that a little bit more. The whole Mos Eisley sequence on the special editions is atrocious, with all these big fucking things walking about, and you don't need it. You just don't need it.
Well, Lucas said about that Han shooting first scene, it upset people because they wanted Solo to be a cold-blooded killer, but he isn't. It had originally been done in close-ups, and it was confusing about who did what. I put a wider shot in there that made it clear that Greedo was always the one who shot first. Do you believe him?
No. Not at all. He's clutching at straws. You're full of shit, George. You wanted to do something that was badass. If Greedo shoots first, then he's got a blaster that's a different colour, and then he could probably sell the fucking toy of it.
Yeah, but I mean, if Han doesn't shoot first, then that makes his arc in the film smaller as well, doesn't it? Because at the start he's a murderer, but then by the end he's a good guy, so it makes his arc even better.
You've just seen Obi-Wan, who's probably the nicest guy in the whole film, just cut someone's arm off. Leave it alone.
Yeah. And he shoots loads of stormtroopers first, so what's the difference between a stormtrooper and Greedo?
Yeah. Exactly.
So from there, the crew all head out on the Falcon, and after finding Alderaan destroyed, being caught in the Death Star tractor beam, and discovering Princess Leia is on the station, they set out on a rescue mission. So what do you think of that rescue, the huge shootout in the detention area?
So the bit I really, really love after that kind of first flurry of shots is when they've obviously realised that the alarm's gone off. So you've got that scene of Han just terribly, terribly trying to bluff his way out of trouble over the intercom.
Yeah.
It's like, we're fine, we're all fine, here now, thank you. How are you?
Really polite.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's really awkward. It's like me trying to start a conversation on Tinder with someone. I just love how it's a little character note because he's been so cocky so far. This is the first hint you get. Think, actually, you know what? He's making a lot of this shit up as he goes along, and he's not half as clever as he thinks he is.
Yeah.
It's just a lovely little character moment inside this really funny bit.
I know that when shooting that bit, Harrison Ford didn't learn the lines properly intentionally so that it would feel more spontaneous and like Han was making it up as he went along. It works really, really well. I think it's maybe the funniest moment in the film.
Yeah, it's up there. It's when he just looks away from the camera and you can tell he's turned around like gritting his teeth a little bit. He's like, oh, that's shit. Boring conversation anyway.
Yeah.
I think this whole scene's a really well-directed action scene, to be fair. It feels like mayhem when the shots start flying, but it's never confusing. You always know what's going on. And I quite like that really snobby Empire guy where he's like, where are you taking this thing? That's surely racist. Surely.
Well, yeah, it has to be. Nobody knows what the fuck's going on, do they, in the Death Star? They can just walk around wherever they want, go into control rooms, walk down corridors. And there's just no communication on the Death Star whatsoever. But the thing that gets me is that it takes them fucking ages to hit all the stormtroopers, but they can shoot cameras out or whatever they are immediately. It's just like, boom, that one's gone, that's fine. It's like, just go and get her out of here. It takes too long, but I do love it, when they go down and it's Luke Skywalker and they come out and everybody comes in, he's like, we're going to have company, and then the music kicks in. And it's like, oh yeah, that starts to ramp up, and then I love that shootout, that back and forth. It's fantastic. It's brilliant stuff.
It is great.
I just think it's pure B movie fun, this bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
just a big old shootout. And in a way, like, it kind of shows Lucas's limitations a little bit. Like, I think he could have made it a bit more interesting visually, because basically it's just two groups of people at opposite ends of the corridor. But the thing that I really like about it was that it's exactly the type of scene you'd replicate as a kid out on the streets with your mates. Isn't it?
Definitely.
Down the back lane, hide behind bins. It's just really fun on that level, and it just really works.
Yeah, I think it's great as well. I like the bit where they're stuck in that corridor and they're in the middle of this huge firefight and the zingers flying back and forth between Leia and Han.
Yeah.
She's just been rescued and the first thing she says is, looks like you cut off our only escape route. And he's absolutely furious.
Yeah, he is.
So two great and very different scenes there as Luke makes the jump from Tatooine to the Death Star. The middle act of Star Wars is where the pacing picks right up. From here on in, it's pretty much relentless, so strap yourself in.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
The crew.
George Lucas was the man with the vision to create the world of Star Wars, but he needed one hell of a creative team around him to bring his dream to life. People like John Williams as composer, Gilbert Taylor as director of photography, and Marshall Lucas as the editor all played key roles, and we're going to talk about them all, but we're going to start back with Lucas, this time as the writer of Star Wars. So we've talked about Lucas already as a director and the man who got the film made, but what do you think of his work here as the writer, the script, the story, the characters?
I think he's overflown with ideas, isn't he? I mean, every version of the script that he turned in at this point was like 200 pages, 300 pages. But as a writer, yeah, I mean, he can't write dialogue particularly well unless he's got incredible actors to deliver it. But as a story arc, it's as old as time, isn't it? That old young hero and the old mentor and good against evil, light against dark, this whole force that's everywhere. It's all the classic tropes, but I think the writing really shines when he does give that character of Leia, he does give her that dialogue. He does know how he wants each of his characters to be, and he does know where each of his characters are going, and they do feel very fleshed out, and the world is very much accessible and at the same time brand new. So I think that all comes along on the right. The way he builds everything is really good.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in coming up with that plot, I know Lucas took a lot of inspiration from a guy called Joseph Campbell. He was a professor of mythology who'd written a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and Lucas took a lot of inspiration from that book because Joseph Campbell had basically studied stories going back thousands of years across cultures all over the world, and he mapped out a 12-point plot that stories about a hero usually tended to follow. You can see that online if you're interested, and when you read those 12 points, it more or less describes a plot of Star Wars. And it works really well. I think Lucas was smart enough to realise that he could tell this really classic story, and by dropping it into the universe he'd made, it would still feel new and exciting and fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, let's give him credit for this universe that's been created here, because that's all from his imagination. Every concept, every alien, every spaceship, every other character, that's all down to his writing, so give him credit for that. And I think if you divide it into story, character, script, the story works just as well as it needs to. It's kind of functional, but that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be any cleverer than it is, and he doesn't clutter it up. He knows exactly how to move the story forward. In terms of character, again, I think it's really well written. He knows what each character needs to do. He gives most characters a little mini arc for them to go through in one way or the other, and he knows when to bring them into a film, when to kill some of them off. It's only really dialogue, I think, this is where it really falters. Other than that, very solid, very good.
Like I mentioned before, with the opening crawl, that was inspired by Flash Gordon, but I think there's a lot more that comes from that, especially with the writing. I've got a quote from Lucas here. He tried to buy the rights to Flash Gordon, the serials, with Coppola to make a film on it.
Wow.
And Lucas said about that, I especially loved the Flash Gordon serials. Of course, I realised how crude and badly done they were, but loving them that much when they were that awful, I began to wonder what would happen if they were done really well. I think we know now.
Yeah, well, I think we do.
Definitely.
I do think we know now, 'cause that's exactly what this is.
Well, they couldn't afford the rights to Flash Gordon, so Lucas decided to just invent his own. He took inspiration from lots of other places as well. We mentioned Japanese cinema earlier, but also real-life history. The Empire came from the ancient Roman Empire.
Yeah.
World War II, the X-Wings and TIE fighter battles are based on World War II movies like the Battle of Britain and the Dam Busters. The Imperial uniforms were based on Nazi SS uniforms. He took from real-world religions. May the Force be with you was from a Catholic saying, may peace be with you. And when he was asked where the Force came from, Mark Hamill said, it's basically religion's greatest hits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucas took from science fiction fantasy novels as well. From Frank Herbert's Dune, he took things like Moisture Farmers and Spice Mines. And Frank Herbert said, when David Lynch came to direct Dune, he had trouble with the fact that Star Wars had used so many of my ideas. We identified 16 lifts and calculated the odds of this being a coincidence produced a larger number than the number of stars in the universe. Really?
All right, mate.
And he took from other science fiction movies like R2-D2 was inspired by the robot in Silent Running, and C-3PO was inspired by Maria, the robot from Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Yeah.
And the spaceships and how they were shot was inspired by 2001. So what do you think of all that? Lucas taking inspiration from so many places. Is it impressive that he melded these things together successfully, or does it make you think less of Star Wars, knowing that lots of it's inspired by different things?
I'm absolutely fine with it, to be honest. As a general point of principle, when we talk about this in film, about directors writing, taking influences from here, from there, from this guy, from these set of films, I don't really have a problem with it, as long as it's given that fresh lick of paint, as long as it's spun into something new, which...
Yeah.
Credit where credit's due. Lucas does make it all seem really new, and he puts it together in a way that, yeah, okay, that's from Metropolis, that's from Flash Gordon. I've never seen Metropolis look like this, though. Those old Flash Gordon seals, so they don't move half as quickly as Star Wars does. So, yeah, I've got absolutely no problem with that happening.
Yeah, from my point of view, art is theft, isn't it? And if you're going to steal, you steal from the best, which is what Tarantino said.
Yeah.
So I think this wasn't done maliciously. I think this was done because these are things that genuinely excited Lucas. And if you're going to steal from anything, you steal from religion, which is as old as time. These stories, it's proved that they work because they're still around. The Roman Empire, you can take as much influence from that as you want, but you know for a fact of what it is. You can take everything about that history and take all the good bits because you know for a fact it's going to work. Like, they were bastards. So if you create these space bastards, you just kind of, when in Rome. So that's the whole point. If you're going to steal, you steal from the best. Like Matt said there, I think there's some sources that people wouldn't expect. And I think a lot of people listening to this might not know all the influences that have been put into it. And they'll be like, my life is a lie. I thought Star Wars was a completely original piece of work. But he's taken from culture. And like Matt said, he's spun them, and he's spun them in the right way, I think.
Yeah, we've had the Empire, we've had the First Order. The next Star Wars trilogy would have to be called Space Bastards.
I'm keeping that for mine. That's what the film's called.
I think there was one thing, though, that Lucas did that hadn't really been done before, and that was to create that sort of used future that Star Wars has, a world which isn't perfect and pristine. It looks like people have actually been living there. I've got a quote from John Barry, who was the production designer. He said, George didn't want anything in Star Wars to stand out. He wanted it all to look real and used. And I said, finally, somebody's doing it the right way.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? Was an idea from Lucas? Do you think that works, that lived-in world he created?
Yeah, I think it totally works. That's a real original part of it. The story and all of that is safe, because if you know that your story is based on something that is guaranteed to work, then you can take all these extra elements and start adding things, because I don't think that's much of a risk. If that didn't work, it wouldn't harm the story at all. It can only benefit.
Well, in terms of the script went through many drafts, and there were some massive changes from those earliest drafts. Have you heard about any of those?
No, go for it. This is going to be hilarious.
So Lucas's first treatment wasn't called Star Wars. It was called The Journal of the Wills.
Was it?
What a lunatic.
So I've read this treatment, and the first sentence of it is, the story of Mace Windu, a revered Jedi Bendu of Apuchi who was related to Usby C.J. Thape, a Padawan learner to the famed Jedi. I mean, what? I mean,
sounds great.
I mean, I've seen Star Wars, and I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah. Imagine what that initial crawl was that De Palma read.
Oh, my God.
It's anything like that to go on.
Well, the first person who read that treatment was Jeff Berg, who was George Lucas's agent. Berg gave just one note on the whole treatment, which was, I don't know what this means.
Yeah.
So after being told it was too confusing, Lucas changed the title from The Journal of the Wills to The Journal of the Wills, Saga 1, The Star Wars. Not listening to feedback there.
Just adding extra shit.
At one point, the main characters were all robots.
Right.
At another point, they were all dwarves. Luke was originally called Luke Starkiller, and at various stages, he was a 60-year-old general. At one point, he was a woman. And Han Solo was originally not human, but a huge green-skinned monster with no nose and gills. So, do you like any of those original ideas?
No.
No, not a bit of them.
Not a single one.
So Star Wars is sometimes criticised for the lack of depth in the writing. I'm not sure it has too much to say beyond what we see happening on the screen. Do you agree with that? Does it bother you if you do?
No, it doesn't have any depth through it at all. But well, it doesn't. But Raiders doesn't have any depth. Jaws doesn't have any depth. Doesn't stop them being brilliant. So it really doesn't bother me with this either.
But I actually think this does. I think it has a philosophical depth to it. I think this whole force and this whole religion that he's invented and this real good and evil divide, it does try to have that. It's all about belief. It's about self-belief. And that's what the film's about. I do think it's spiritual. It has got elements to it. Very simplified. Very much like a Penguin classic book on faith. But it's still there.
No, I agree. I think it is a bit of a missed opportunity, really, because he does set these things up. Like the Force can be taken as a religion or can be taken as a spiritual thing, the Empire or space Nazis. And he could have done a lot with commenting on the real world in his world, but he doesn't really try to, other than just setting it up, which is a shame, I think.
I don't think he knows how to, though.
No, I don't think he does. Just know where to start.
That's fine. Don't bother.
Let's just be grateful he got rid of the previous drafts and we ended up with it.
Yeah.
Rather than asking him to make it any more complex. No, it's fine, George. Don't put yourself out. Fine, mate, leave it.
I mean, this is absolute proof that nothing comes out pristine from the first effort.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to write and rewrite and keep writing and keep writing. And if anything, this is inspiration. Because if it started like that and ends up like this, fuck me, what a journey.
Journey of the Wills.
Another criticism Star Wars tends to receive is around the dialogue. A lot of people say it's not very natural or realistic the way the characters talk. There's a famous line, isn't there, that Harrison Ford said to George Lucas on the set?
Yeah, he said you can type this shit but you can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a fair criticism of the dialogue in Star Wars, do you think?
I think it is. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But if you look at the David Prowse voice takes on YouTube, you can see how the dialogue isn't going to save anybody here. It's atrocious. You know, if you say to anyone and deliver that amount of exposition for a final line where you say you are part of a rebel alliance and a traitor, take her away.
Yeah.
Like, oh, thanks very much. Well, that's her backstory. But if you just kind of go, it just seems like there's the exposition you need, but the way that's delivered by Earl Jones and that performance, and it's like, it's more Vader's frustration in the performance. You don't feel like it's exposition. It's giving you that information, but it's perfectly delivered.
Yeah, I do understand the criticisms of the dialogue. It's not the most naturally clever here by a long way. Where I do think the dialogue works really well, though, is in, again, the world building. I like how Lucas just drops in references to random things and then doesn't explain what they are, like Han saying, it's the ship that did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Makes it feel like there's all this stuff going on off the screen that we're not seeing. So I think in lots of ways, it's a bit of a masterclass in world building, Star Wars, and I think it works really, really well with the dialogue in that way. The things the characters say is really trite and really poorly written at times. But there are some good things about it as well. Again, to play devil's advocate. Matt, what about you? What do you think of the dialogue? I know you hate it.
Yeah, I'm disgusted by it. So bad. No, it's not good. And like I say, John, the only good thing about it is those little kind of elements it drops in there that hints at that wider universe. Like to drop in the Clone Wars. What? A Clone War?
Yeah.
What on earth is all that about?
Brilliant.
That's a good little bit. But it's all the functional dialogue that just joins up the dots between scenes and just kind of has to get you from point A to point B. It's like Lucas himself is really bored in that and will literally just write down the first thing that makes some kind of sense to get to without any idea of how it's going to sound or how the actors are going to deal with it. One that stood out to me on my last rewatch of this is when Lucas with Uncle Owen and he's asking about Obi-Wan and Uncle Owen goes, I don't think he exists anymore.
Yeah.
Who phrases it like that?
For his work as a writer of Star Wars, Lucas was nominated for an Oscar. He lost out to, Matt?
Woody Allen for Annie Hall.
And Marshall Brickman for Annie Hall, yeah. And on writing Star Wars, George Lucas himself said, the reason I wrote Star Wars was to give young people a place for their imaginations to run around in. I wanted them to think about colonizing Mars, and the only way that's going to happen is to have some dumb kid fantasize about it. I guess you could say It's Our Only Hope.
Oh, God.
All right, George.
Yeah. Quoting yourself?
We've not really mentioned him to this point that much, but there is another giant of Hollywood who worked on Star Wars. The great John Williams composed all the music for the film, some of the most iconic music ever composed. So what do you think of John Williams' work on Star Wars? Is the music still good?
Oh, yeah, it's still epic. It's still absolutely one of the best pieces that he's ever written for any film soundtrack. I think one of the big challenges he's got as the composer is that as the film Star Wars could have been really camp or silly or trivial, I think his music is a massive, massive part of making sure that it's not. But it's not overly serious. It's got that spirit of fun. It's got adventure. There's bits of it that are very moving. Bits of it that are incredibly dramatic. It's easily up there with his best, isn't it?
Listen, right?
We're listening.
Without John Williams, without this score, there is no Star Wars.
Oof.
But that's it. Like, you take this score off, it just completely lacks everything. This adds everything that it needed to round it off to become what it is. It's its complete character is this score. It tells you exactly how you need to feel, where we're going to go. It's all here. Without John Williams, this would have flopped.
He is essential. I know originally, though, Lucas had planned to follow what Stanley Kubrick had done with 2001 and not have an original score, but use classical music to give the film that grandiose feel that he wanted.
I think that's what he's done anyway, but John Williams has just created it to an original score. But I think that vibe, again, is the same as what really influences him and what really excites him. Stanley Kubrick's done it, and that really worked. So he's taken it off Space Odyssey, and he said, well, I'm going to do that here and use classical because he knows it works. He's seen it before. So he's going to go down that route, but he does it and, again, takes the idea and it's elevated.
Well, you mentioned that idea of Steven Spielberg, who said, you're making a very original film, you need original music to go with it. And Williams had just worked with Spielberg and won an Oscar for Jaws, so Spielberg introduced him to Lucas. So Williams proposed the idea of a 19th century classical romantic style with recurring use of leitmotif. A leitmotif is basically having a recurring musical theme in the film that comes up over and over again.
Yeah.
And he took inspiration from classical pieces. Gustav Holst and Stravinsky were too. But for the main Star Wars theme, Williams borrowed from a 1942 movie called King's Row, composed by Erich Wolfgang Korngold.
Yeah.
Have you heard that music from King's Row?
Yeah.
Can you hear Star Wars in it, do you think?
Absolutely, 100%. Have you read the comments?
Yeah, on YouTube.
People are just like, my childhood's ruined. This is Star Wars.
Was that you, Westy?
It was me, yeah. Every comment's me with a different account. Took us fucking ages. It was well worth it.
Well, most people probably haven't heard that, so we'll play a little bit of it now and let people make their own minds up. So, this is King's Row by Erich Wolfgang Korngold from 1942. See if you can hear Star Wars.
You will.
There it is. Star Wars. I mean, King's Row. So, even the best borrow sometimes, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, of course.
So, what's John Williams' best moment in the film, do you think?
My favourite music is probably when Star Wars appears on the screen and you get that initial bang. That's for me is fantastic.
I would go for the binary sunset scene because it's so integral to the story, no dialogue, and it's a scene could have been quite cheesy, you know, the young hero staring off into the distance, thinking about things, but that music, the way that Williams has taken that theme and made it really melancholic, he's filled full of yearning, and that music tells you exactly what's going through Luke's head at that minute. It fills it in beautifully.
It matches the visuals so well, it pairs it so well, and it just really elevates that scene. It's like putting brown sauce on a bacon sandwich. It's already good. Now this works. Fucking hell.
That scene as well is a good example of that leitmotif theme I was talking about, because it's used there, and then that music's also used in the final scene of the film when Luke and Han collect the medals from Leia. The melody's identical, but in the final scene it's much more bombastic and triumphant. Yeah. For his work on Star Wars, John Williams won his third Oscar, and today the AFI ranked the Star Wars score as the greatest score in movie history.
Right.
Wow.
Ahead of Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, Psycho and The Godfather. Williams is 6th on the list as well with Jaws. Do you think Star Wars deserves its place at number 1?
It's in the conversation, but personally I think he went and embedded it with Empire's soundtrack. I think that's a better suite of music. I think there was more to it. But, you know, it's not one I'm going to be disgusted about being at number 1.
Also, the score for Star Wars went into the Billboard Top 20 in the US, something which had never happened before. And to this day, it's the highest selling film score of all time.
Really?
Understandable.
Deservedly so.
Lucas said about Williams' music, to hear Johnny play the music for the first time was a thrill beyond anything I can describe.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Calls him Johnny, apparently.
Looking at John Williams, he's anything but Johnny.
But to finish with John Williams, the legendary composer himself says about Star Wars was an extraordinary journey. I tend not to fixate on my previous work, but it's the one I'm asked about most often, and I am as proud of it as any other work I have done.
Made the film what it is.
Yeah.
All of the great work done elsewhere doesn't count for a whole lot if the film doesn't look good. So Gilbert Taylor was the director of photography on Star Wars, responsible for working with Lucas to create the specific look the film has. He had quite some filmography even before Star Wars, and had been DP on lots of films. Most notable were The Dam Busters, A Hard Day's Night, Repulsion, Frenzy, and The Omen. First off, is Gilbert Taylor's work on Star Wars a bit overlooked, do you think?
I think it's massively, massively overlooked. It's everything that it sells into this world. You know, it's got that real gritty look to it, which makes it accessible, but at the same time, it's not pretentious, it's not pompous, it's not overlit. All the sets are treated with the respect that they deserve. Everything's got its own style and look and real texture. The colour palettes he uses are fantastic. Just the way you've got all the dark of the Empire and the silver and the metallic. Like, it's never boring. It gives you enough shadow and depth. I think he really explores shadow and depth excellently in the film. I think it's totally, totally overlooked.
I mean, if you hadn't mentioned his name there, I honestly wouldn't have been able to tell you who the cinematographer was on this. It's actually a really good job that he does. He's got to go from scenes in deep space to brightly lit interiors on spaceships to dusty interiors on this desert planet to really dark stuff like in the detention cells and the trash compactor. There's a lot that he's got to do, and it all flows really, really well together. It all feels like it's all the same universe, it's all the same world. Maybe even a bit too understated for its own good.
Well, Lucas originally wanted Jeffrey Unsworth to be the DP for Star Wars, mainly because he'd shot 2001 for Kubrick. He was unavailable, so Gilbert Taylor, who was DP on Kubrick's film before 2001, Dr. Strangelove, was brought in. Right. And boy, did they clash, Lucas and Taylor. Gary Kurtz called Taylor old school and crotchety, whereas Lucas obviously was young and wanted to do new things. Have you heard about the sort of things they clashed over?
No, I haven't.
So, lighting. Lucas would always make suggestions on how to light a scene, and Taylor did not like that. One of the reasons Lucas hired Taylor is because Lucas wanted Star Wars to have a documentary sort of feel because of Dr. Strangelove and A Hard Day's Night. He thought Taylor could deliver that. Taylor didn't like that either. Right. And Gary Kurtz tried to replace Taylor midway through production with a cinematographer called Harry Waxman, who did The Wicker Man. But the camera crew made it clear if Taylor went, so did they. And then Fox settled the dispute by basically backing Taylor, not Lucas. So how Star Wars was shot, it seems, is in a lot of ways down to Taylor. So seeing as he is almost largely responsible for it, what do you think Gilbert Taylor's best shot in the film is?
Again, I'm going to go back to that scene that I always go back to, where he sees the burning house and it cuts to that wide shot, and he holds that for literally, it's only a few seconds, it's not long. It's the transition as well between that real sense of space and then the TIE fighter comes across and you get that wipe.
Yeah.
It goes from one to the next. I love the way that cuts together. That's excellent.
I'm going to go for one that it does really well in combining several different elements. And it's only quite small, actually, but it just gets me every time. It's when you see an X-Wing dip into the trench for the first time.
Oh.
And it bobs.
It's the bob. It's the fact that's a genius touch. It bobs as it rights itself. Oh, it gets me every time.
Those moments are fantastic. Those shots, the camera work there, fantastic. It's so great.
Yeah.
I think the whole point of that is that it's so good and it's so well done, it doesn't feel like it's a camera. You feel like you're in an X-Wing.
Oh, totally.
Well, Taylor did not return for Empire, no doubt because of the strained relationship between him and Lucas. He did, though, shoot Flash Gordon in 1980.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
I wonder how Lucas felt about that, the movie he wanted to make.
It's probably like a massive fuck you. That's the only reason he's done it.
And when Taylor was given a BSC Lifetime Achievement Award in 2001, Star Wars was cited as one of the major reasons why. Gilbert Taylor passed away in 2013, but he said about his time on Star Wars, I hated almost every second of my time on the picture. George avoided all meetings and all contact with me from day one.
Wow.
So I read the extra long script many times and made my own decisions as to how it should be shot. I experimented with photographing the lightsabers and other things, and would say I was quite successful.
Yep, good lad.
Yeah.
The final crew member on Star Wars we're going to talk about is the person credited with editing the film. Marcia Lucas was George Lucas' wife at the time, and at that point she'd worked with Lucas before on THX 1138 and had worked on 2 Scorsese films in Taxi Driver and New York, New York. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't usually talk about editors all that much, but Marcia Lucas is often credited as the person who saved Star Wars.
Right.
Do we know much about this story?
Personally, no.
Not a whole lot.
So the original editor for Star Wars was John Jimson, who had edited Zulu, A Hard Day's Night, and Frenzy. So great experience, but his first edit of Star Wars was, in Lucas' words, an absolute disaster.
Bet you it was great.
Well, you can see some of that first cut online today on YouTube, and the opening where we're with R2 and 3PO in the space battle. It keeps cutting to Tatooine to Luke with his friends, and it totally kills the film. There's no pace to it at all. Right. Lucas was devastated when he saw the cut. He knew it was bad, but didn't know how to fix it. And Marcia Lucas says about that, George had his head in his hands, and I said, yes, it is a mess, but there's a great film in there. It can be saved. Mm-hmm. So Lucas fired Jimson and asked Marcia to do it. She brought in Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch to help her. They'd recently done The Conversation in Carrie. They took out all the unnecessary exposition, like those scenes with Luke, and re-edited the film so the pace was dictated by the cuts rather than the actors. In Marcia's words, we sped it up and made it tighter. I mean, the film does move like a rocket pretty much from the start. Do you think you can tell there were problems with the editing at any point?
Not when you see this cut that we all know. I don't think so. But I think that's the case with most films. I don't think you're going to get the first cut back and it's going to be perfect. But for them to construct what we've got now out of it, it does, yet again, as we went from Gilbert Taylor and we're now going to people who've worked on Scorsese films and real professional, old school, classic filmmakers. These people who've got real classic experience, so they didn't treat this like a daft sci-fi film that it is on the page. They treat this like it was Lawrence of Arabia or something, you know, and they brought everything to it, like we're going to make this the best edit that we possibly can.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the final attack on the Death Star in particular is really well edited. It's really fast-paced, but it's like crystal clear what's going on. In the seconds before Luke fires the final shot that blows the Death Star up, the cuts are coming at like 2 or 3 a second. It's lightning, but it's really, really clear what's happening. It's dead impressive.
I always think, like, from looking for little niggles, I kind of wish the whole infiltration of the Death Star, I'd like that to be a little more tense. I kind of feel like the film maybe should spend a little bit longer, because it just seemed that they kind of get in and out there a bit quick. But it's very small flaws, if they're the ones I'm picking out. Because when this editing works and it comes together, it works brilliantly.
Well, after that first disastrous cut, Marcia Lucas, Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch ended up winning an Oscar for Best Editing. Paul Hirsch returned for The Empire Strikes Back, and Marcia Lucas returned for Empire and Return of the Jedi as well. Marcia and George divorced in 1983, but he still acknowledges her importance to the film. About her work on Star Wars, Marcia Lucas quite modestly says, George knew it wasn't right, and I told him how to fix it. That's it in a nutshell. And when the movie came out, well, that was a whole lot of fun. I'm very, very proud to say I worked on Star Wars.
Yeah, lovely.
2 other people who we should mention briefly whose work was massively important are Ralph McQuarrie and Ben Burt. Ralph McQuarrie was the concept artist Lucas hired right at the outset, and he designed how lots of Star Wars should look. So, get this as something to put on your designer CV. He designed Darth Vader, the Stormtroopers, the 2 droids R2-D2 and C-3PO, Chewbacca, the X-Wings, the TIE Fighters, the Star Destroyers and the other spaceships, the Death Star, and the lightsabers.
Well, yeah, that's everything, isn't it? Anything else he did, he didn't do? Yeah, when Lucas submitted the script for Star Wars to Alan Ladd at 20th Century Fox, he included Ralph McQuarrie's concept art to help visualize the idea, to help sell it. Alan Ladd said, without that art, there was no way it could have got past the board. Absolutely integral.
Lucky man, Lucas.
Yeah, it is again.
Looking into it. Lucky Lucas, that's what he's called.
Ben Burt was a sound designer on Star Wars who created pretty much all of the now iconic sound effects. So this included the blasters, Darth Vader's breathing, R2's beeps and whistles, Chewie's growls, the lightsabers, the scream the TIE fighters make when they fly past camera, I'm a particularly big fan of that sound effect in the Death Star. That.
Yeah.
That's great.
Perfect, that, mate. Really good.
Wow. Ben Burt, absolute legend. So he won the Oscar for this, and then he also won 3 more for Raiders, E.T., and The Last Crusade. So many like iconic sounds from this guy. Absolute legend.
That's some CV for him as well. So.
Yeah.
Star Wars was Lucas' brainchild, and he had quite some vision, but with that vision being so out there, he needed a very creative team around him to pull it off. And with those names mentioned there, John Williams, Gilbert Taylor, Marshall Lucas, Ralph McQuarrie, and Ben Burt, I think he certainly had that.
Yeah.
Lucky man.
The end.
Looking at the end of Star Wars now, and we're going to talk about 2 big moments. We're obviously going all in on the Battle of Yavin, where the rebels attack the Death Star. But first, we're staying with our heroes and talking about the demise of Obi-Wan. So, after rescuing Leia, Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie get back to the Falcon and make their escape. Obi-Wan doesn't join them, though, as he's killed in a lightsaber duel with Darth Vader.
It's a massive catalyst for the end, innit? It builds up, and it's a real shock when you first watch it. It's a real surprise that he's kind of like just given up, and then you realise why. He's done his job now. He's got him where he needs to be. They can escape. He sacrifices himself. It's classic, isn't it? But it is, I mean, quite clunky. It looks like 2 old men in a social club with a couple of like broom handles just going at each other. And I normally like despise any kind of dialogue during a sword fight. I'm not fucking... When they get close and they clash and they come forward and it's just a little bit of line of dialogue. I normally fucking hate that, but this is the only film that I've seen where I actually go, yeah, that really works. Yeah, you'd straight me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. It does add to it, it makes the sword fight bearable. It's great when you see them in the wide shot. I love the scene. I think it's great.
I think it's your classic story trope, isn't it? Like we mentioned, the mentor dying at the end of the second act. And I think this is one of the best examples of it. It brings some weight to the film. And just after that moment as well, when Obi-Wan vanishes, the bit where Luke screams and then Williams' music like crescendos, where Han's like, blast the door, kid. That bit feels massive. It's absolutely brilliant. Right. It's really well put together.
It's magic. He can't hit any stormtroopers, but he can shoot the door lock.
No, it is a little bit creaky. I mean, there's that bit where Obi-Wan kind of spins around mid-battle, and it's like watching the learner driver do a 3-point turn for the first time.
Yeah.
But it's fine. I don't mind it. I'd rather have that than an old Obi-Wan twirling through the air and bouncing off the walls and vaulting over Vader's head.
Yeah.
Because the important thing to me is that this duel, it's all about the emotional beats behind it. It's about master against the apprentice. It's about what Obi-Wan is sacrificing and why he's sacrificing it and why he's making sure that Luke sees what he's doing. So all those emotions, all those storytelling beats are all caught up in this. So if it's a little bit creaky, I don't care because it works on a deeper and a better level than just the visuals.
So Obi-Wan sort of sacrifices himself so the others can escape. That wasn't actually in Lucas' original script, and it was Marshall Lucas' idea, as she thought Obi-Wan's story was over at this point because he didn't do anything in the final act. It was a good idea to do that, surely.
Yeah, perfect.
Definitely. Yeah.
And there's a scene just after this on the Falcon as well, where Leia's consoling Luke over Obi-Wan's death. So does it bother you that Luke is way, way more bothered by the death of some crazy old fossil he's known for 5 minutes than he is by the deaths of the 2 people who brought him up since he was a baby?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
He doesn't want to do that harvest, though, does he? He's more relieved.
Yeah.
So after making it back to Yavin with the Death Star plans, Luke is suddenly promoted straight into Red Squad and given his own X-Wing.
Straight in there.
Straight in. We see a mission briefing that tells us everything we need to know to understand the Death Star attack, and then we see the attack itself. So space dogfights, trench runs, and Luke's arc complete when he uses the Force to destroy the Death Star.
Okay, here we go, because it's still the single best action sequence that's ever been done in cinema.
Yowza.
But it is. It really is. It's just from the beginning to end, it's so incredibly involving. The editing is razor sharp. I love the simplicity of it. I love how it's basically, right, you start off at point A, get to point B, and don't get fucking shot down. No complications.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love how emotionally involving it is, because even though you don't know any of these pilots, I don't know about you guys, I genuinely feel sorry for each and every one of them that get shot down,
Yeah.
Because I know by this point in the film, what's at stake? A last ditch, last effort, backs against the wall. Mission this is, because if it fails, everybody's dead. So when they get shot down, I don't know who that guy is, but I feel good for him. I wanted him to get out.
Yeah.
And the bit that cements its genius for me, each and every time, you always, always, always forget that Han's going to come back and save the day.
Yeah, you do.
You are so caught up with Luke. You're in that cockpit with him. You bite your nails. You're on the edge of your seat. Vader's got him in his sights. Not once have you thought of Han, despite the fact the last time you see him, it's blatantly set up that he's going to come back in some way.
Yeah.
And then when he does, I mean, is there a better punch to the air moment than that?
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not.
There's not. Oh, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I know there's a big influence from World War II movies there as well, like the Dam Busters and Battle of Britain. I know that Lucas had ILM watch those movies to see how the air battles were cut together, and they basically copied them, sometimes shot for shot. But I agree, I love how he gives it its own little story and its own little narrative that he sets up in that mission briefing, and then we know what's going on. It's pretty smart, and it's not just attack the Death Star. It's you've got to get down this trench. They're going to be chasing you. The point of view shot from the TIE fighter is the chasing the X-Wings. They're fantastic as well.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it's all the visuals that are used that lended themselves to that tension and that lend themselves to that build. It's that clock counting down.
Yeah.
They don't look like 70s graphics. They look like they're from Star Wars. You know, they're completely of their own look and their own identity, really. It's unrecognisable, even down to, you know, the computer readouts, the X-Wings, still recognisable. There's no stone left unturned with the details. But if this sequence didn't end the film, I honestly don't think it would have been the success that it is. You need this moment. This is basically everything you've been waiting for an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes. And it does not disappoint on any level. You know, when they're like, attack formations were going in and then the X-Wings turn and then the score ramps up, but it really works for me. I love that ending. When that blows up, man, it's just fucking Christmas Day.
Oh, it's great, yeah. Just the dialogue between the X-Wing pilots, it's like it's ingrained in my brain, like, stay on target.
Stay on target. Yeah.
I love it. It's all like Red 5 standing by.
It's great.
Red 3 standing by. It's got their own kind of language and it doesn't sound cheesy at that point. It sounds like, right, well, this is what it actually sounds like.
Yeah.
What's better, guys? X-Wing or Y-Wing?
X-Wing.
Every day?
Every day. Y-Wing for you, is it?
No, it's an A-Wing, but I don't want to sound like a tosser.
I'm going to say Y-Wing just because I had it as a kid, like the toy.
Right.
I don't know if I prefer TIE fighters either, because they're cool as fuck. But I always thought they were called TIE fighters because of like the bow tie shape.
I think they are, and they sort of retrofitted it to mean something, so the TIE now stands for something.
Twin ion engine, that's what it stands for.
All right, nerd.
What else am I doing here?
This has got to be like the first science fiction film as well that actually captures speed in space, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when you think of space travel, when you've seen it for 2001, obviously incredible model work and it's going for that realism. But stuff like Forbidden Planet, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, all that 50s stuff, none of them got the sense of speed in space. And this one, it captures that velocity like an absolute rocket.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's the editing, it's the camera work, it's the sound effects. It all works together. It feels like they're going at some speed down that trench, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love the scream of the TIE fighters as well. That's one of my favourite sound effects in there. Absolutely great.
It's terrifying, and I think the sound design on this especially is incredible.
Have you seen footage of audience reactions to the Death Star blowing up in 1977, where there's like huge cheers and rounds of applause?
I'll be furious to be told.
Also, we have to mention the final scene, the medal ceremony, where Leia gives medals to Luke and Han, but not Chewie. What do you think of Chewie being left out?
She couldn't reach.
She is quite small, to be fair.
Yeah, that always kind of sucks a little bit, but I don't think he wanted one. He probably just went, nah, I'm all right.
It's too cool. Just wanted a dog biscuit instead.
So we've reached the end of the movie. The Death Star is destroyed. Han discovers some things are more important than rewards, and Luke is on his way to becoming a Jedi. The climax of Star Wars caused cinematic meltdowns in 1977, and it still, I think, holds up really well today.
Oh, without a shot of a doubt.
Easily.
Reception and awards.
Star Wars released on May 25th, 1977, and was like a bomb going off in terms of not just Hollywood, but popular culture. At first, though, it wasn't plain sailing. When 20th Century Fox tried to distribute the movie, only 32 theatres in the US agreed to show it. So Fox said that any cinema that refused to show Star Wars would not be given the rights to screen The Other Side of Midnight, a World War II love story that was due to release. And The Other Side of Midnight ended up taking about 5% of what Star Wars did.
Of course.
So 32 theatres took Star Wars initially, but by late summer, it was playing in 1,098 theatres across the US, which was an astronomical figure back then. To give some context, Jaws broke the record by a long way in 1975, and that was in 400 theatres. So those two films changed Hollywood completely and overnight, basically.
Yeah.
On a budget of $11 million, Star Wars grossed $530 million on its initial release, toppling Jaws as the all-time number one. And today it has taken $792 million in total at the box office. It's still the second most attended movie of all time in terms of how many tickets it sold. It sold 178 million tickets. Do you know what number one is?
Is it Gone with the Wind?
Of course it is. Of course Matt knows it.
I'll just let you have that, mate.
Gone with the Wind sold 202 million tickets. So to give you an idea of how big that is, Avengers Endgame, which is now the highest grossing film ever, came out in 2019 and sold 93 million tickets. So half the amount Star Wars did.
Wow.
Yeah, so around the time Star Wars was released, Francis Ford Coppola, he's in the middle of making Apocalypse Now, having a meltdown in the Philippines. Everything going wrong that could possibly go wrong. So he sent a telegram to Lucas, staying at a hotel wherever he was at the time, asking for funding to finish off Apocalypse Now. Because obviously Lucas was absolutely rolling in it by this point.
All about the money, Coppola. He is like Han Solo.
He is, yeah.
Full circle.
We mentioned earlier about the test screening of Star Wars, where Lucas played it for some filmmaker friends and also 20th Century Fox executives. After that screening, well, Spielberg knows a hit when he sees one and said it's going to be the biggest movie of all time.
Yeah.
Alan Ladd, the head of Fox, loved it and said to Lucas, "Finally, I know what you've been talking about for 5 years." And there was an executive at Fox called Gareth Wigan who was so blown away by Star Wars that he cried during the screening and told Lucas, "This is the greatest movie I've ever seen." And when Wigan got home, he gathered his family around the kitchen table and said, "I want you to remember this day because I just had one of the greatest experiences of my life." Amazing.
And it wasn't the birth of any of his children that he had around the table.
Exactly, yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, now they thought about that.
Yeah.
That's what I do every time I come back from the cinema, to be honest.
As for the critics, mostly positive reactions there too. Roger Ebert gave Star Wars 4 out of 4. He called it an out-of-body experience and said, "Lucas' decision to set pure storytelling narrative in outer space is inspired."
Yeah.
Pauline Kael, do you think Pauline liked it?
No, she doesn't like anything. Hates her own mum.
Well, she hates Star Wars as well. She said there's no breather in the picture, no lyricism, and no emotional grip. It's like taking a pack of kids to the circus.
Oh, God.
Time magazine called it exhilarating and unlike anything we've witnessed before, and they named it their movie of the year.
Lovely. More honest.
But a few critics found fault in the lack of representation of ethnic minorities in the film. A writer for New Journal and Guide called it one of the most racist movies ever produced.
Really?
Yeah, their reasoning was the force of evil is dressed all in black and has the voice of a black man. Lucas said that was the one criticism that really hurt him. What do you think of that as a criticism?
I mean, it's an easy one to do, isn't it? It's like, you can criticise that, but I think it's a sci-fi film. It's not trying to say anything else. So if it was trying to have a social commentary, like we said earlier on, if it was trying to explain what was going on in the world and that was reflected in this one, it's not trying to do that at all on any other theme. So why should you have to pick up on that and make a negative out of that?
Yeah, and I think Vader's dressed in black and Luke and Leia are dressed in white because, like, light and dark, isn't it? Good and evil, really simple, yeah.
I think it's just very typical of the time, though, when, unfortunately, you just wouldn't get many black actors in roles. So it's certainly not going to be the only film of that time to have, you know, an exclusively white cast. I mean, it does stand out that even all the extras are white, but again, it's just indicative of the time, indicative of the industry and how difficult it was for minorities to get any kind of representation. So it's certainly not a overt move by Lucas by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, today Star Wars still fares really well. It has 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and their summary calls it a legendarily expansive and ambitious movie. George Lucas opened our eyes to the possibilities of blockbuster filmmaking, and things have never been the same since.
Yep.
True.
And on IMDb, Star Wars has a score of 8.6 out of 10, which puts it 29th on their all-time movie list. And it did amazingly well at the Oscars as well. It won 7. Best Film Editing for Marshall Lucas, Paul Hirsch and Richard Chew. Best Original Score for John Williams. Best Production Design for John Barry, Norman Reynolds, Leslie Dilley and Roger Christian. Best Costume Design for John Molo. Best Sound Mixing for Don McDougall, Ray West, Bob Minkler and Derek Ball. Best Visual Effects for ILM. And a Special Achievement Award was given to Ben Bird for sound effects.
Yeah.
And it received 4 Oscar nominations, which were Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor for Alec Guinness. Was it treated fairly by the Academy, do you think?
I think so. That's loads of nominations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's treated better than Zodiac was.
So, So a huge film on its release, as big as anything before since. And as we can see from some of those stats, no surprise that Star Wars had the impact or influence that it had, I don't think.
Definitely not. But in every marketing piece of media afterwards, you never ever see, multi-award winning, Oscar winning. It's not on the posters. It wasn't necessary. It was popular without that. So it didn't even need that. That's how popular it was.
Yeah.
Sequels and influence.
Hits as big as this don't come and go without having an impact or influence, and Star Wars is no exception. Something that always surprises me, actually, is just how many other big-name directors say that Star Wars was the movie that made them want to become filmmakers. There's quotes from lots of famous filmmakers out there, but to mention just a few of them, Peter Jackson said, "The experience I had as a 16-year-old in New Zealand seeing Star Wars for the first time changed my life forever." Ridley Scott said, "It was seminal. After seeing Star Wars, I cancelled the film I was making next and went after Alien, which, as you can tell, is hugely influenced by George."
Right.
Guillermo del Toro said, "I stayed in the cinema all day and watched it 5 or 6 times. George created something unique in film history."
Yeah.
And Christopher Nolan said, "I saw it in 1977 and it was a mind-blowing experience. And every film I make, I want to create that same experience for the audience.
Yeah.
Every birthday party I went to for 2 years, you went to see Star Wars." I mean, Christopher Nolan was a child at that point, I should add. He wasn't like 21 or something. Star Wars
Birthday
parties.
parties.
And James Cameron said, "When I bought my ticket for Star Wars in 1977, I was a 22-year-old truck driver. Within 1 hour of seeing the movie, I was an unemployed filmmaker."
Amazing.
Nice.
That's a great one. Yeah. So no Star Wars, no Lord of the Rings, no Terminator, no Alien or Aliens, no Blade Runner, no Nolan films, essentially.
There you go.
And also in terms of influence, there's another industry that Star Wars had an even bigger impact on than the movie industry. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Merchandise, toys.
The toys, yeah.
Of course.
As we mentioned at the top, Lucas cut a deal with Fox that gave him full rights over the merchandising of Star Wars. Movie merchandise at the time was small fry, but Star Wars changed all of that, specifically around the Kenner action figure toy line that was released after the film. To give you another stat, the Star Wars movies to date have grossed about $10 billion at the box office. When you throw in all the merchandise, it's made about $40 billion.
Amazing.
Which is ridiculous.
Unreal.
Yeah.
And this leads us very nicely into a question from one of our patrons from Patreon, Jamie Russell. Hello, Jamie.
Hello, Jamie, mate.
Hello, Jamie.
So Jamie asks, "My mother gave all of my Star Wars toys away to charity when I moved out of the house."
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Obviously, I'm still getting over that. My favourites being the Millennium Falcon and Luke's X-Wing. What is your favourite piece of Star Wars memorabilia?
He's taken 2 of the best ones there, hasn't he?
Yes.
I had a speeder bike from Return of the Jedi.
Oh, lovely.
And you press the back and it all explodes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I
do you
had
remember
that.
that one? Yeah, that was
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
my favourite. That was fucking ace.
Yeah.
Well, I can empathise, with Jamie, because when I was a kid, my brother's a few years older than me, and he had loads of Star Wars toys. Then I had loads as well, so we had a lot between us. And my mother gave them all away.
Oh.
So now, all I've got left is an AT-AT from Empire. And I've got it on display in my living room. So, to answer Jamie's question, I would say the AT-AT. It's great. It's about 25 inches high. You can put action figures in the cargo bit and in the head bit as well. and you control its head, and you can move it and fire its blasters and stuff. I mean, none of that works now, obviously, and I've got no action figures, but it still looks good.
Blasters? Did that ever work?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did used to work. Yeah,
Amazing.
They would light up and they would like fire like the proper guns. Fire.
Oh,
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
And Matt, what about you?
Yeah, like you guys had a load of the figures that most of them I kind of remember being passed down to me from like older siblings and other members of the family. But I'll go for the Y-Wing because that was the only craft I had. And I had an R2 that you could fit in. I never had a Luke, though, for some reason.
All right.
So I just used to put Han in there instead. Basically made my own story up. So yeah, I'll go for that. And that's why in the film I always like the Y-Wings more than the X-Wings, just because I have that association.
So Star Wars changed the types of film studios made, how they distributed them, and by making merchandise so lucrative, it changed the movie business model. I think it's beyond question that Star Wars had a big impact and was massively influential. The question is, though, did it change things for better or for worse?
In lots of ways, you'd have to say for the worse. And the one that just comes to mind is that I don't think you can talk about Star Wars without talking about the fandom that comes with it. And the unfortunate thing is, a lot of that fandom, especially online fandom now, is like so toxic. And particularly when I'm thinking about the sequels in the Disney films, where you can't even mention them without being attacked by hundreds and hundreds, it seems like, of people on Instagram or Twitter who don't like them, but also don't like the fact that you have a different opinion to them. And I think probably that's because Star Wars was such a massive thing. I think just too many people have like bound up their own identity with these films. So they take any kind of deviation from that as a personal attack. And it's just not a healthy outlook. And it gets to the point where people like Kelly Marie Tran, who played Rose in the sequels, you know, all she ever did was take a role in a film and perform to the best of her ability. But because that certain amount of toxicity within fandom didn't like those films, didn't like her, she got so much like racist abuse that's just basically being forced off social media and isn't able to engage with the fans who aren't like that. And I'm sure they are the majority, but that very, very kind of vocal, very toxic minority just really makes it quite sad that Star Wars can't be a thing that you can discuss wholeheartedly. There's just such a large section just step over the boundary each and every time.
You're right. I mean, you've got me worried now, Matt, about us releasing this.
Oh, yeah.
Chased off Twitter. Unfortunately, in terms of Hollywood, I think it probably has changed things for the worse. Before Star Wars and Jaws, the movies that took the most money were things like The Godfather and The Exorcist, filmed with lots of artistry. After Star Wars, that stopped pretty quickly because I think studios realised that huge spectacle makes money. But I don't think that's really necessarily Star Wars or George Lucas's fault. Obviously, after the runaway success of Star Wars, other studios wanted to cash in. That was always going to happen. And for me, they had two options. Either they could have done what Lucas did and create something unique and ambitious, push boundaries, create something extraordinary that people haven't seen before and that they'll want to see because of that. Or they could take Star Wars as a template, more or less replicate it, and have people go, oh, that looks a bit like Star Wars. I'll go and see that. They obviously thought, well, option 2 is easier than option 1, so let's just do that. I mean, like we've said, stuff like Alien, Terminator, Blade Runner, Christopher Nolan movies wouldn't exist without Star Wars. But unfortunately, those movies are far outweighed by the huge spectacle blockbusters with little substance we often get. Transformers, for example, is a direct result of the success of Star Wars. So artistically, I do think Hollywood would probably be in a better place had Star Wars not been such a big hit.
Yeah, I've got to agree. I think that its influence, it is a very positive film. And I think the point is, like, touching on what both you guys are saying, I mean, the influence is when it's done right and you get the right things from it and you use it as an inspiration. And you take that inspiration and the stories behind it and the drive that Lucas had and the originality of it. And if you do that and you create your own thing from it and use it as inspiration, and that's fine. But it's the amount of people who ripped it off and the amount of times this is just trying to be copied and bettered. Every time you watch Star Wars, I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I feel like it's just my film. Even if I'm watching it with other people, I'm thinking like they're not getting enough from this that I'm getting from it. It feels like a really personal experience every time I watch it because I watched it so young, and I think it's what pulled us into cinema, and I think people are attached to it emotionally. And when you start changing that whole landscape, it does have that impact, both positive and negative, really. But it's testament to it. Every single phenomenon, everything that's so popular is going to have ups and downs, positives and negatives. But yeah, I do agree. I think the negatives do slightly outweigh the positives here.
Hits as big as Star Wars don't come and go without having an impact or influence, and they don't come and go without sequels being made. Since the first film we've been talking about, there have been a further 10 Star Wars movies released. I had a dream that Disney asked us, all the right movies, to write the new Star Wars trilogy, the next one. We'd sort them right out. I think it's clear to see the impact of Star Wars goes beyond just making lots of money and influencing studios to make more movies that are the same. For some people, it's been a part of their lives, and for some huge filmmakers, it was the movies that ignited their passion for filmmaking. The films since the originals are not as good for us, but Disney, if you're listening, pick up the phone.
Hit us up.
Yeah, we'll sort it.
All the right movies ranking.
Star Wars, then. We're at the end. Have we enjoyed talking about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great.
I have as well. And now is the time to give it the all the right movies ranking treatment. So, out of 10, Westy, what would you rate Star Wars?
It's such a wonderful thing for me to revisit this. And I like to wait a little bit and come back to it. I don't like to kind of nail it. Like, my kids have seen it and they hammered it as much as I hammered it when I was their age. So they got it. They don't say, oh, this is old-fashioned or this is too old, which I get from a lot of things. But I don't get that from Star Wars, because this film, and I'm just talking about A New Hope here. I'm not talking about the whole thing. I'm talking about this one film. It's very special for me. I feel like a kid when I watch it every single time. I think it's an absolute miracle that it exists. I think it's a miracle it was such a big hit. I'm so pleased it was. I'm so pleased it does exist. It is one of my favourites, and I still love it as much now as when I first saw it. So I cannot say anything else but a 10 because of what it is and its legacy and how important it is to cinema and what it's done and how many people it's influenced. Yep, 10.
Ooh, big start. For me, it's not just one of the defining films of the last 50 years. It's one of the defining pieces of popular culture of the last 50 years. Those first three films, there's nothing else quite like them. Lots of imitators, of course, but I don't think anything comes really close. I don't watch Star Wars as much as I used to, but when I rewatched it to do this episode, I loved it. Would I call it one of the greatest pieces of art in movies? Probably not. But would I call it one of the greatest achievements in movies? Yes, I would. Yeah. For its mind-boggling creative genius from many people involved, and for its enormous impact and influence, and for the 6-year-old who was me, who was utterly blown away by it. I can't give it any less than a 10.
Beautiful.
And Matt, Journal of the Wills?
Well, if they'd kept that title, it's still incredibly fun. I would say I don't think I've got the nostalgic love for it that you two do. I think as a kid I was always far more into the Indy trilogy than I was into the Star Wars trilogy as a whole. Right. But still, so influential, so incredibly entertaining, and it does that thing that I really, really love about films, where you could make a list of all these things that could have gone wrong and probably should have gone wrong and shouldn't work, and yet it does work. It works like an absolute beauty in setting up that universe and putting those characters in that universe, giving you concepts that you just want to find more and more about, and then ending with just one of the finest endings I've still ever seen. But I still have little niggles with it. I've mentioned with the editing, some of the dialogue's not great. And when it comes to Star Wars, there was better to come. So it's going to be a 9 from me.
No!
Still a big score. And as we always do, we also asked our Twitter followers to vote. Some of their comments on Star Wars. Matt Lum, at Matt Lum, who's one of our patrons. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, Matt. Hello.
I'm giving it a 9, but I think much of that is based on nostalgia, as I must have watched it most weekends growing up. Yeah. The scene where they're all in the garbage store room really stuck with me, and it's aged brilliantly. My 10-year-old boy loves it now. Empire Strikes Back is my favourite, though.
Yeah.
And Steph, at Steph_Hamilton, said, when it came out, I was absolutely awestruck, so it's a 10. The shock and awe of the effects have diminished now, though. I'd imagine seeing it for the first time now would be a good experience, but not as shocking as 1977. I think that's probably fair.
I think that's fair, but if you watch this for the first time now on an IMAX,
yeah,
take your fucking skin off.
And to play devil's advocate, our very own PI is not such a big fan as we are. And he said, I don't get it. Never have, really. I don't mind Empire Strikes Back, but this one is not that one. I gave it a 7 as I can't really remember it, but what I do remember wasn't memorable enough. Now, do excuse me while I press on with today's third viewing of The Running Man, 1987.
If you can't remember it, then you can't comment on it. I don't agree with that.
Like any film, I mean, it's not for everyone. I think if it doesn't click with you, you're probably sort of thinking, what's all the fuss about? If it does click with you and you buy into that world, it just blows your head off.
Yeah, it rewards you in leaps and bounds.
And our Twitter followers ranked Star Wars as 9 out of 10. So that gives Star Wars 38 out of 40 in total. You can check our website for the full ranking table. So that's it on Star Wars. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to us talk as much as we have talking. But, I mean, we're doing Empire at some point, right?
I hope so, yeah.
Gotta be.
Well, Luke and PI will have something to say about that, I think. I think that's it. We've enjoyed our time now. We've got to go back. Big grown-ups.
If you did like it, if you could please share us on your social media platforms, Twitter and Instagram, then that would be brilliant and much appreciated. Yeah. And for access to those exclusive podcasts and our full episode archive, please visit patreon.com/alltherightmovies. And speaking of Patreon, a special mention for our Director's Chair level patrons who are Adam Cowie, Adam Yates, Andrea Barker-Syed, Adam Randall, Damien Lennox, Daniel Lawson, Gary West, Graham Chater, Jamie Russell, Just Joe, Kenny Morrison, Matt Lum, and Robert Shearer. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Legends, guys. Thank you.
You can also follow us on social media where we have lots of great movie content to take a look at. On Twitter, we are at @right_movies. On Instagram, we are at @all_the_right_movies. And our website is alltherightmovies.com. Coming up next time, it's all play and no work as Westy, Matt and Luke bring you another legendary and seminal classic in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Ooh.
You don't want to miss that one. Westy has some outrageous opinions on the Apollo moon landing.
I'm researching it now. It's going to take us about 3 months.
We're all off now to see if we can sell our incomprehensible screenplay to Disney for $4 billion. Don't worry, I'm not going to say May the Force be with you. I can't pull that off. So be well, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
May the Force be with you. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, cheers, guys.